Wonderful.
Oh, wait, I do.
Would the clerk please, thank you for joining us for tonight's special meeting of the Tacoma Park City Council. Would the clerk please call a roll?
Mayor Searcy,
Here.
Councilmember Fulcher, Councilmember DeBala, Councilmember Gibson,
Here?
Councilmember Siemens,
Present.
Councilmember Honzak,
Present.
Councilmember Small.
Yep.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much for joining us this evening. Just as a reminder, tonight is a special meeting where we will continue to have presentations on our budget. Just as a reminder, there's a few things in terms of the order of tonight's meeting that'll be a little different because we are talking about a special meeting. So tonight we will have public comments on the 2025 budget, followed by budget presentations on communications budget, the library budget, recreation budget, as well as housing and community development budget. Just as a quick reminder, we are limiting comments this evening just to public comments on the 2025 budget. We will not have council comments, nor will we have comments on any other general items this evening. Also, just as a reminder for everyone, on Wednesday of this week, April the 17th, the council will meet at its regularly scheduled time of 7:30 for the budget work session, and during that time we'll discuss budget reconciliation. On Monday, April the 22nd, is Passover. We'll begin at sunset, so for those that are celebrating, happy Passover. And then on Wednesday, April the 24th, the City Council regular meeting will be at 7:30. We'll have a public hearing on the FY 2025 budget, followed by voting session, a resolution supporting the Maple Avenue Association Juneteenth celebration, as well as continued budget work session on budget reconciliation. So with that, do we have any public comments on the FY 2025 budget? Hold on one second, Tom. Do you mind pushing the button on the mic for me? Perfect.
Okay, thank you. Tom Gagliardo, 107 Hodges Lane, Ward 1. This is embarrassing. There's nobody here tonight, very few people. There's nothing in the newsletter. I wrote an email asking why there was nothing in the newsletter. I pointed out that important dates, which appears on page 1, said nothing about tonight's hearing or the budget in general. It was on page 2, and there's no discussion of the budget other than mention of certain dates. That's unforgivable. There's an ordinance that requires the city newsletter to promote matters of community concern. I then looked at Facebook today, and the announcement was the next council meeting is Wednesday. I sent a comment in, and it was changed, and it was announced that it was tonight. That was sometime midday today. Here are my comments. First of all, I could really make this simple and say everything that I and my colleagues said a year ago. And I want to say something. I'm going to run out of time, but this is more important than particular comments on the budget. I don't doubt your motives. I don't doubt your sincerity. I don't doubt your diligence. We come here week after week, not because it's enjoyable or fun, but because it's important to us. And we want to see you do the best job you possibly can. So here are the specific comments. Short term. Can't we defer some of the 7 police vehicles that are being requested and the 60-foot roll-on, roll-off trailer? And I addressed this to the chief of police, Chief Duvall, who's a good cop, and I respect him for that, and to Director Braithwaite. What harm would come if for 1 year we delayed just those 2 purchases? Long term, as Arthur David said last year, look at the disparity between the market price for commercial properties and the assessed value. That's the big ticket item. Now, it's not an easy lift, It's complicated, it's complex, requires state action, but it's necessary. So if you want to raise revenue, if you want, I think we have an expenditure problem, not a revenue problem. But whether you agree with that or not, follow what he told you last year. Go to the state legislatures. We have a responsive, competent, highly regarded state delegation in Senator Smith and the 3 delegates. Go to them and start working on a proper assessment of commercial property. That's all I have to say tonight.
Thank you very much. Do we have, and just as a reminder for folks that are participating and watching, tonight is not the public hearing. The public hearing was held last week, and there will be a public hearing that will be held on Wednesday, the 24th. What we are doing tonight is being responsive to the feedback that was received, that when we have special meetings, to also provide residents with an opportunity to provide comments during budget season. So tonight is not the public hearing. Tonight is just providing residents in attendance with an opportunity, or virtual participations with an opportunity to provide any comments that they have on the 2025 budget. Do we have any other public comments on the FY 2025 budget? Again, that's the only thing that we're commenting on tonight. Do we have any virtual comments? Okay, perfect. All right, so we're going to move into budget presentations. So first, communications.
Hi, Mayor, council members. Thank you very much for this opportunity to present the FY25 budget for communications. I want to start off that the communications department is consists of city TV and radio, communications, and the Tacoma Park newsletter. Our mission in the communications department is dedicated to foster open government through community engagement and enhancing public awareness through a diverse range of multimedia platforms. We strive to inform, inspire, educate, and connect our residents through timely and relative content via City TV Radio, communications, and the Tacoma Park newsletter. As a trusted source of information, we prioritize accuracy, integrity, and transparency in all our communications. Our commitment to provide reliable content empowers individuals to make informed decisions and fosters trust within our community. By upholding the highest standards of reporting ethics and embracing our role as stewards of public information, we strive to cultivate a culture of credibility and accountability. These functions are accounted for in 4 divisions. They are administration, city TV, communications, and the City Park newsletter. Our staffing has not changed from FY24 through proposed FY25. We have one full-time production manager and 2 producers, AV assistants, for a total of 3 in City of TV, and communications director and a communications specialist for communications. We have a part-time pool of students with no benefits that help us with editing and also filling in for when we're over budget and overtime. And we also have a writer media specialist who works with the city newsletter, who is also part-time. So that's a total of 1.82 hours. The communications provides essentially 14 touch points of outreach available to every project and program. This outline includes our website, printed newsletter, our website blog, social media. I'm not going to go into every single one of them, but you can see some of the work that is included in each. We have a weekly radio show. We have a Tacoma Insider, which is a bi-monthly digital newsletter that goes out. We also have a bulletin board here in the community center. cable TV channel, closed captioning. We also do media coverage, internal communications, branding and strategic management, graphic design, and strategies. Our social media engagement has really increased across our social media platforms, and Ryan has done a really great job of engaging residents as we are seeing an uptick of participation across our projects and programs. City TV, radio, Kathy Plevy and Ron Hardy have teamed up together to host a weekly radio show in both English and Spanish. And we sign up interviews with all departments, and we've been booked ever since we started this initiative. Our successes to date for City TV and radio, I'll go through a list of some of those. City TV and radio have produced and aired over 340 episodes of We Are the Tacoma and Somos Tacoma radio show. They've showcased segments produced by neurodivergent staff focusing on inclusion and diversity. And they facilitated the longest city council meeting in over 25 years, lasting 6 hours and 43 minutes on September 13th, 2023. The newsletter success has achieved notable enhancements in newsletter delivery, often reaching the community right before the end of the month. Our targeted outreach efforts toward businesses in wards 4, 5, and 6 to address the special needs and foster community engagement. We feature compelling human interest stories from residents who have also inspired the community, in addition to our operations. Communications has successfully administered over the last year the Direct Cash Assistance Program, which has benefited over 1,400 households. We've effectively communicated the library and community center renovations to the community, public schools, and staff, and that's an ongoing communications, and we meet weekly to discuss updates. And all of these can be found on our website blog under alerts, so any changes that happen are updated in the moment as we get them. Increased internal messaging to staff. We've also done outreach with that regarding programs and projects affecting their daily operations. Our budget, overall division expenditures have increased by 5% more than FY24. Our personnel increase is due to salary cost increases of 8.11%. Our operating cost has been reduced of 3.5%, projected mostly for the maintenance costs of the old website. Civic Plus is expected to launch on June 2024. Our operating cost includes our newsletter, contracts, website, and software. Some of our emerging issues and challenges. Our website migration has been one of our biggest. We have 45 or more go-to-launch requirements. We've recently hired a temporary to help us work through that. We are moving so quickly, it's really exciting, and as we complete each department, we're going back for them to verify and make sure that all the information is updated. And we still have some new content that we're working on migrating as well. When Civic Plus did the migration almost over a year ago, they actually didn't provide any style guidelines. They literally dumped the content in, so we're having to go back and correct that as well. Again, as I said, our library and community center renovations have also been challenging, mostly with the move of the control room for City TV. This control room has never been inventoried. Every time when we move it from the control room to the Rose Room, every single cable, every single piece of hardware will have to be cataloged and dated, so we do have inventory, and we are able to see where our, some of our issues are going to be. And right now, we've got a contract a contract approval will be coming to you. We're working with our legal team right now for outside technical support, as well as working with this relocation of moving the library construction from not one room, but two. So once we move it from the control to the Rose Room, it'll then move back into the, back to the control room. So you'll be seeing that request coming. We are seeing an increase in new programs in the city communications. Our projects and programs with our departments being fully staffed. We have great significant outreach with sustainability manager, grants coordinator, and Safe Routes to School. We're so excited, and all of these engagements are actually bringing in lots of more participation. So that's it for me.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Councilmember Small.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to say a couple of things, sort of quiet, quite loud about this. First of all, the salary adjustments in this department were deserved, and it makes a lot of sense to adequately compensate people. I'd like to address that kind of tangentially by saying that given the needs of this kind of department and the overlaps between the hardcore tech and the administrative ease of facilitating both the transport and information to the citizenry, I would really strenuously consider adding either another half-time person in this department or a full pay here, because it's just not realistic for us to assume that the kinds of burdens that we have communication-wise should just fall on one person, or ambitious students as ambitious as they may be. I say that because of the next part of this, which is related to the website and Civic Plus. This is another one of the places where the city staff has either the dubious misfortune or the great good fortune of me having had to have done a website on my own when the person that I thought was going to do it punted and or was not competent. And so, having done that with Civic Plus, I can 100% reiterate that, yes, it sucks when they dump all of the information to you and they don't tell you how to do anything about it. And even when you're trying to put the pages together, you would think that it would be a lot easier because they have all of the municipalities. But capitalism being what it is, I don't think they pay as much attention as they used to. And so I don't begrudge you the burdens that you have there. And I think it's one of the reasons why, in the grand scheme of things, and like it may not be this budget, it may be into other budgets or whatever, but as the city thinks about moving forward, this is one of the departments that needs to be respected with regard to FTEs, because the burden is just great. It's awesome to have you guys go first, because I would love to reiterate and champion the position that realistically it's the hardest working department here, and they got to sit here and listen to all of this blather. So that's how I feel. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember.
Thank you, Councilmember Small. Councilmember Gibson?
Yes, Donna, I just wanted to ask with regard to the website migration, could you point me to, one or two areas that have been changed so I can kind of look at, see how the
Sure,
different?
I could be happy to send you a link. We are looking at sending council a link probably in the next 2 weeks, only because we're trying to make sure all the updated information is inputted.
Right.
If you want to take a peek earlier, we've got lots of stuff.
No rush, I
working.
just wanted to see
But
how
we'll
it's
definitely
changed.
ask council for a good 2 weeks to review the website, give us some feedback, and let us know what your thoughts are, what you think we're missing, maybe to change some of the, we're certainly not going to launch without your input.
Excellent, okay, so it hasn't,
Yeah, no,
but-
I just got the temp last Wednesday, so for the last 2.5 days, we've been doing intense training, and it is quite different than the WordPress. So I feel very confident in the temp that we have. We've already changed 2 sections in 5 departments, so we're pretty excited that we're moving in the right direction.
Great. One issue that kind of comes up periodically when I talk with folks is some households get 2 newsletters. Some households don't get any, and I know it's outside your control, I believe, because of the process that the post office uses. What is it? I don't know, it's rural routes or?
It's right. It's rural routes, and I think something of what's happening is all of our newsletters go to Shady Grove Post Office first before they're sent to the city, because the Tacoma Park Post Office cannot handle the 7,000 inserts that it receives as the newsletter every month. It is then divvied up by the different wards through there. So we every 3 weeks we try to get the newsletter to the printer within a week to spare before we hit the end of the month, because we know that people may not get the newsletter till the 3rd or 4th, even though we've gotten it to the printing company on the 26th. So
Right.
we have a very short window of which we're working. Now, we are working with the local post office and postmaster, Mr. Griffith, and he's been instrumental in making lots of changes and holding some of the mail carriers accountable. So we are working with him. We give him, I receive, information, emails from council members and residents alike who tell me if they didn't get it. And I work to do that. Sometimes if we're able to, we drop off newsletters as well. Ryan or I will do that. So they're not missing that. Sometimes people are housebound and they can't get to the community center. So we're working, but it's getting fewer and fewer. But unfortunately, sometimes it happens and there's no rhyme or reason as to what it is. We do not have a mailing database, which is what everyone thinks, that I can put addresses on and take them off. This is more like your flyers of Safeway and Giant. Sometimes you get 3 of them, sometimes you don't get any.
Yeah.
But it helps keep the cost down. If we were trying to do it the other way, it would be significant.
I'm just suggesting, since it comes up so regularly, that it might be worth a brief little note in the newsletter
Sure.
itself.
Yeah.
Why we try and save costs and what the effect of it is, and then if you don't get your newsletter, I guess what you should do about that.
Sure, that sounds
I mean,
great, and
just
we can add that.
Because I had understood that we're trying to save money in this case,
Right.
and by using that kind of rural route, that works. So I appreciate that. I haven't checked recently, but there was a question earlier in the council, or it came up at a council meeting with regard to the policy about the newsletter itself in terms of its, and I think I looked at the website in terms of what the newsletter is and what its mission is as a independent entity. And I guess I'm wondering if that's the case, if that is really an accurate portrayal of, because I believe that it is, we don't farm it out to somebody
Right.
else to do it. It's an in-house organ.
Correct.
And I think that the website information that I looked at some months ago suggested that it was that it was somewhat independent. I may be wrong at that.
Yeah, it's not independent.
Right,
It is, it's a way of showcasing how we're spending
Right.
tax dollars to our residents.
Well, I'll just double check what the
Yeah,
website.
and I think some of the information, we've created a style guide for the Civic Plus, so we will have, departments will have goals and summaries and all of that so you'll see a consistency through the new website. Doing that in our old website will just slow us down and moving to the Civic Plus.
Yeah.
So we do have ADA compliance, we have lots of checks and balances in the new website, and I think you'll see that once you get an opportunity the next 2 weeks.
Great. One last thing. I just
Sure.
want to thank you personally and your staff that was helping me to develop the technology behind a survey that I found was very successful. So some hand-holding for some Luddites. Thank you very much.
Yep, thank you, we're here to help things.
Councilmember Honzak?
Thank you. I would like to echo what Councilmember Small was saying in particular. I think you might remember that a year ago, communications is top of my list in terms of what I would like to make sure that we have the capacity to do, and I can see you guys are just doing so much. So I was wondering, though, if you could just shed light a little bit. This isn't a very specific question, but just shed light a little bit in general terms, and if you think it's worth following up with a memo, I think it'd be interesting to share with the public as well as us. How you see I'm looking at the 14 touch points of outreach, how you see some of those changing, and therefore kind of what some of your big picture within the next year or two, how you see the budget possibly shifting because communications are moving so fast, and also how you see Tacoma Park residents having the particular demographics and makeup that we do, like how you see that usage changing and kind of what we might anticipate coming down the pipeline. And again, if you're not ready to answer that, I didn't give this to you beforehand, but I just thought you might kind of have some
Well-
general thoughts for us on that. Like, we know that the cable funding is going down, for example,
Right.
and I'd like to think about imagining a year from now, where we might be headed.
So a couple of things. I think
Okay.
in terms of the cable grant, we're well aware that the decreases are coming. I think for this year and possibly next year, we'll see a decrease, but I don't think it'll be significant immediately. We are working with Montgomery County, Montgomery College, and also MML We are in constant communications with them, as there's several options on the table right now that as a group, we're just reviewing, looking at samples of what other municipalities have done in situations like this. We're also aware that the federal government may also be offering some guidelines and suggestions, or funding is our bigger piece, coming down the pike as well. So we are working through that, and of course, when we're ready to share and there are some options and closer to where we are now, these are just samples that we're reviewing. In terms of the communications, I don't see any of this going away. If anything, we want to streamline. So with our social media, what's really difficult right now, we're using our Meta, which is Facebook, and we're using X, formerly Twitter. They're constantly changing the reporting mechanisms on us, so they make things disappear when they don't want to report news or they want to advocate for something else. So we're going to be using Hootsuite. We've already been using that for a little bit. It will not only archive our social media, but it'll give us our reporting and keep all of our information. And one of the great things about Hootsuite, and there's a couple, but we really centered in on Hootsuite, is that we are able to do uploads to social media across one screen on every single platform. And we're so excited for that. So we are going to be testing that the next 2 weeks, right after we get our employee newsletter launched, which we're working through that too. And I think some of the things that we're doing, we're also offering LinkedIn education to all of our community, City TV as well, and newsletter, any of the staff. We have up to 22 users, and it allows everyone to join in LinkedIn to get any type of training that you're interested in. It's all virtual, and we're really excited about it. It offers, if you want certificates, you can even have that. But there's so many components for the communications department about storytelling and reaching out in different platforms that are becoming, bigger and better maybe than Meta or whatever else comes down the pike. But to be honest, we also want to make sure our IT is involved, because much like we've seen TikTok, some of those things have some real big issues and implications. So we've got to be, we're excited to look at new things, but we're not up to blink an eye and jump immediately. So we want to make sure we cross all of everything before we, jump to a new platform. But we're always looking at new platforms. That's our job, is to see what residents are using, what we're being asked to use. We just, because of the group of us being so small, it takes us a little bit more to go in and dive into some of the things that we're looking for and hoping that they'll match with us, and then we'll be able to roll those out.
Thank you, Councilmember Honzak. Councilmember Fulcher.
My apologies for the longest meeting you guys have ever had to be a part of.
That was actually going to be my opener. I'm like, I don't want that to be my claim to fame, but if it,
Maybe we can get one of the shortest ever?
I don't know. But I will say to anyone that said we did not debate the minor master plan,
That's right.
that's what we were talking
right.
about for over 6 hours, almost 7 hours.
Needed that statistic last week.
It was the minor master plan before it went out. So thank you all, City TV and everyone who participated in that. I do have one question. So, we're hearing a lot about what people want to see in terms of more for the news, for the newsletter. And we see that our writer and media specialist is only 0.38 FTE.
Right, 15 hours a week, right?
Yeah.
That's not much when you're looking to track down people, to get interviews, to have things, and then to create the story.
And so one of the things I know that I've heard from a couple of council members right now, in terms of, a moderate increase in terms of the amount of time, so of the FTE that you have that are, don't have benefits and the like, is the writer media specialist the one that needs the most time, or are you looking for more time towards your part-time FTE pool?
Well, I think that the pool, and I would like to talk with Avro first, honestly,
Yeah.
because that's not something we've discussed, and I'm not sure how much of, when we're in late meetings, like the next morning, we've been finding recently that there's also events tomorrow morning. There's NLC there at 8:30 to 10:30, and pending what time we leave here, if that same team is going to be there tomorrow morning. So I would like to speak with him on that, because I'm not sure, but from a standpoint that I know of the writer, right now we're at 12 pages, and we actually have a part-time contractor, which, for the editor, which is Eric Bond, who is an amazing man to have, and he's got an amazing talent, he's creative, and he wants to move the newsletter even bigger and better. But we're also very limited by that, because how much we're doing 12, possibly 16 pages at certain points. This edition in May, we're looking at a 16-pager.
Wow.
We were able to incorporate the budgeting information, that the whole full story, more dates, more information, as well as, elections are going to be coming upon us. So we want to get the residents prepared. What do you need now? What should you be doing now? Yes, it's far off, but we take them through the journey, would be able to do that. So, we're even Ryan, between the radio, same with City TV, we're all crossing different lengths, moving, and sometimes because of, like, if I'm working on budget, I'm not able to jump in for hours somewhere. So there's quite a we are running all day, and we love what we do. So it's not that we wouldn't, and we would, but there's times that we take a pause if we rushing too much. Are we really completing the storytelling? And sometimes we're not. But I think that's something that would have to be discussed with city managers and deputy city managers, and
Yeah, it would.
and sustainability. Like, just adding someone doesn't change the scope of everything. We really need to map out a plan,
Right.
for that.
And that's kind of helpful. I think, especially as we're getting ready to go into reconciliation, what I'm trying to think through is, would it be a moderate increase to bump up that writer-editor to, say, a 0.75, right, given the growing expansion of the newsletter itself? Or is what you're saying, hey, let's just make it shorter, or figure out some efficiencies and give us a little time to kind of work some of those things out?
To be fair, I think the newsletter is the one piece of communication that reaches every household. And we have the icons, to put the main stories on the website so that people can use the translation. That happens every month. There's 4, probably right now, Eric has been earmarking 6 to 8 stories a month. So all of those stories also appear on the website so that people can use translation. I couldn't even imagine trying to translate this newsletter at all. So at this point, we're running a 3-week timeline of capturing all this data and information and storytelling that we're trying to put into the newsletter. And we only have 1 week to print and get it out. So that's not really 2 days to the production team for printing and 3 days to mail. And as we can see, sometimes that's not enough. But I do think if we want to do more of a 16-pager, we'd have to look at printing cost and ink, paper. That was an issue last year and the year before, because of the supply chain break, and paper sizes changed. All kinds of dynamics happened with us, which ended up in our favor. We were able to actually increase the length of the newsletter with barely low maintenance cost, and the same way with our ink. We were already using spot color. If we did 4 color across the board, it was even cheaper. So it allowed us to have some play in the newsletter, and I think people really enjoyed seeing that. But if we do that, all those costs have to be looked at.
Accounted for.
And there's postage, that could change the ounces of what we're printing now. If we went even bigger than 16 pages, that could be something of an issue that we need to check. And the post office is now increasing as well. So we're paying about $10,000 in postage every couple of months.
I'm
is
sorry.
that we're running.
Point of order, Mayor. I missed this part potentially, but is it bulk mail? It's not bulk mail, right?
It's called rural route, which is not a bulk mail, but it is like there's no guarantee that you'll get it. There's no guarantee you won't get more than one.
Yeah. Okay.
And there's no mailing database people think I moved 17,000 residents off and on. It's based by house address, not by person.
Yeah. No. I look. You're still speaking my language, because it is an arduous and horrible thing to have to think about doing that too. And the distinctions between the way in which they run different mail opportunities are interesting, because you can't necessarily knock it down to digitally in their system to each individual house, even in the zip code, because the zip code is bigger. And then if you start doing, like, it's just, I feel your pain. Like,
And I think we do 16 pagers quarterly, so, 3 or 4 times a year we do them. And they're when usually like an election or a big event is happening, so that we are able to make sure that residents get all the information that they need. And we try to do it prior to the event happening, not at that time.
Yeah, so I think what's really important, and thank you so much for that, for me, is to kind of understand conceptually is the issue. We need a little bit more in terms of writing, editing, just, if that's not appropriate. Or, it sounds like we don't want to mess around right now beyond what we've budgeted for in terms of estimates for the length and the frequency of the newsletter. But I'm trying to, I was just very surprised to see that the writer-editor is only 0.38.
Right.
And so just trying to make sure, and if you all want to have a conversation internally, we can go ahead and flag it on the reconciliation list as an item to discuss when we talk about reconciliation. But I'm just trying to get a firmer handle on, I see it as a marginal increase in terms of bumping someone up from 0.38 to like 0.5 or 0.75. But I could be totally wrong about that. I'm just making it up in my brain. So it would be helpful to kind of get a firmer handle on what that need is. And it's okay to say, no, we're good. But it would be helpful for me, especially because I know that there's an increasing number of folks that are looking forward to the newsletter, looking forward
Yes,
to stories
absolutely.
that are related to specific things in the newsletter. I hear it. I know my colleagues hear it. So if whatever we could do to try to figure out the right way to provide you all some balance. And then the last thing, because I know this is supposed to be a shorter one, I am so excited about the website. I have been screaming about modifying this website.
Me too. It's grown
many
whiskers
years.
over time. So we're giving it a good shave right now. So we're working really hard to try to, we need it and we want it. And I think that it's way past due. So getting this temp has been, it's just amazing.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for working on it, and I look forward to beta testing. And we're also beta testing with residents, a small pool of folks
Absolutely,
as
we'll
well?
have a
Okay.
small group of residents, yep, and every department will have input and look, and, we'll make all the changes. And I think the biggest part is to make sure it looks new and fresh, and it has, content, but that it's easy to find and looks better and has engagement, has videos, has things. We're adding all of those pieces to it.
Oh, that'll be awesome.
Yeah, we're so excited. And the color is very beautiful, too. I'm very excited about that.
Excellent. All right. Does the city manager want to comment?
Yes, thank you. Before Donna wrapped up, I wanted to be responsive to the concern that Mr. Gagliardo mentioned earlier, and thank you, Tom, for coming and express your concern. First of all, I want to apologize that we literally were not able to get the budget summary by the publication date. As Mayor Council know, unfortunately, we weren't able, and it's a very difficult budget, particularly to bring in with us not recommending additional revenue through a property tax rate increase and some of the other challenges that we had with the budget, which will be rolled out a little bit more as we go. The budget wasn't being able to be posted until April 1st. And I believe your publication date was like a whole week earlier.
Correct.
So it just literally, so it's not communications department's fault by any means. They were poised and ready to go anytime we had the information. But collectively, my team and I were still working on important elements of balancing this proposed budget right up until the last minute, which unfortunately was a whole week after publication. So the timing was unfortunate, but the good news is that next year, we are proposing an earlier budget calendar so that we want to unpack some of this, and I don't think we'll run in, I absolutely do not think we'll run into this problem next year. I think it is important to provide the public with a summary of the budget proposal prior to public hearings and discussions, and I couldn't agree with that more. So we will endeavor to build all of that in for next year. But I just want to make it very, very clear that is absolutely no failing on the part of the communications department, and it's just a circumstance with a very, very tight and difficult budget calendar and process this year. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to say things are getting better already, so thank you so much. Appreciate that.
All right, wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
very
Seeing no
much.
more
Thank you.
lights, we're going to move on to the library budget.
All right, good evening, Mayor and council members. I do want to give a quick kudos to Donna and their team, because librarians love storytellers and they're our city storytellers. So thanks to them, they do a great job and they're wonderful to work with. But I'll go ahead and dive into the library and computer center budgets. So we revisited our mission statement when I came on board in 2021 and ended up retaining the language as you see it here because it really felt pretty evergreen. The mission of the Tacoma Park, Maryland Library is to respond effectively to the literary, education, and informational needs of a diverse community by providing and promoting resources, collections, and referrals that match community interests, nurture a love of books and stories, and represent a broad range of views within an inviting and safe environment. And that's what we're working toward every day. So I'm not going to go by the slide, or point by point through this slide, because it's a lot, and that's also the point. The library and computer center cover a lot of ground. This is what we're currently doing with fewer than 12 FTE. There's a lot of talented and driven staff members in my department. I'm really proud of the work that they do. But we've got three main areas of service that I've separated this into. We've got circulation and collection development. By the time the books are out on the shelves and patrons can browse them, they've already been researched, vetted, procured, cataloged, processed, and then shelved. And none of those are steps that are able to be skipped or skimmed. We've got computers, reference, outreach, and asynchronous programs, and that one's a bit of a catch-all, but it's a lot of our outward-facing, people-driven services, and that includes the computer center and all of the one-on-one instruction and assistance that's provided to residents, as well as reference, which is assisting residents with locating quality information to answer their questions and address their needs. It's also outreach, which is anytime we take the library out of the facility, city-wide events, schools, community events, we do a lot of that. And then asynchronous programs are programs that can be done on the residents' own time and pace. And one of the examples here is the scavenger hunts, which are relatively new, but they've been very, very popular, especially with our high-energy young patrons who are visiting when a synchronous program is not happening. But then, of course, we have the synchronous programs, which, apart from the books and computers, are the most visible service that we offer, especially with programs for children like Neighborhood Circle Time, which have been going on for decades and are very popular. So this is our departmental organizational chart. We have a little under 12 FTEs, which includes a few part-time positions. So we have 14 permanent staff members, and then several substitutes who come in as needed to ensure that the desk is fully staffed for the 58 hours a week that we're open. And I'll speak a little bit more to this on another slide, but of course you can hold this up next to the previous slide and see that there are not a lot of people covering a lot of services and activities. For our fiscal year 23 and 24 year-to-date successes, this is like not even close to a complete list of successes, but there are some highlights here. I really love every opportunity that I can take to call out the excellent work that my staff are doing. So this is a small swatch to like a full palette, but I've broken these up to nest within the different council priorities. The first one is advancing a community of belonging, which really is our bread and butter. This is something that we have our eye on every day, both when we're planning and doing the work. The newer programs noted here represent both approaches that we take as well. Sometimes we do more targeted programs that are addressing a specific need or audience, like El Cuento, which is a bilingual Spanish-English program for young people. And then the other approach is programs that can appeal to anybody, like the Crochet and Cozies program that we've heard about here in the past. Our collection development philosophy, which is the selection, procurement, and processing of books, also aims to offer representation of every reader that visits our facility. And last year, we took a big step towards being able to do that successfully for our residents who either need or want to read in Spanish, when we got $15,000 worth of new Spanish language materials, thanks to a grant secured by our youth services manager, Veronica Rivera Negron. Under environmentally sustainable community, of course, we have the LEED Gold certification that we're working towards with the library and community center redevelopment project. And that's the most formal recognition that we would have for sustainability efforts, but also borrowing books instead of buying them is inherently a sustainable practice. Less weight to ship or paper to print for individuals, and library staff are some of the best reusers of material that I know, whether it is repurposing boxes, cutting up old documents to use as scratch paper at the public service desks, or even gathering donations of crafts for programs or used books for fundraising sales. Sustainability is really integrated into what we do every single day. So I've got some statistics here under the engaged, responsive, service-oriented government section that speak to our reach within the community. We've been engaging in an evaluation of our research strategy for the past year or so, and one of the priorities we identified was being present in more wards of the city, which we have been doing. We've also put on more than 290 programs between fiscal year 23 and year-to-date 24, and almost 9,000 people have attended those programs. Reference interactions were not tracked before it got here, so I don't have a lot to compare them to, but we've been doing a snapshot week the last couple of years so that we're able to report these numbers to the Public Library Survey, which is a nationwide information gathering event that happens every year that we had not been participating in since we don't get funding from the state library, but I've gotten in touch with the state library and we are participating in that now so that again, while we don't receive funding from them, I'm attempting to get a little bit more familiar with them and hopefully pave the way for some more formal collaborations with them moving forward. And all of that data reporting is a big part of that. Another program that we're currently in the implementation phase for is adding a discovery layer for the catalog. So I'm calling it a success, even though it's not quite here yet, because I'm very excited about it. But it should roll out by the fall. The discovery layer is called Aspen Discovery, and it is essentially a service that works in tandem with our catalog to make more online items discoverable within our public-facing catalog. So you would be able to search the catalog for books and music CDs and all that, but also a lot of our databases, subscription databases that have APIs that can work with it. And that includes like EBSCO, Gale, and Oxford Reference. So lots of good materials that we're paying for, and we just want to make sure that they're working as hard as they can be. Some expenditure highlights here. First for the library and the department as a whole, and then the next slide will be the computer center. There is an increase in the overall departmental budget of 5.76%, which is mostly due to increases in wages and fringe benefits that are decided citywide. The same goes for employee recognition. We're very fortunate to have a lot of very long tenured staff on our library staff that are a wonderful knowledge repository. They've been here a long time. Programming expenses, materials, and contract items have been pretty stable for the proposed fiscal year 25 budget. Overtime does have a proposed increase that reflects the way that this line item was used in fiscal year 24, which was largely responding to outreach requests and covering for unplanned staff absences, mostly with illnesses. The supplies line item increase of 11.49% is the children's and adult book budgets. As we prepare to kind of power through construction, get to the other side, and open a new facility, we want to make sure that our collections are current and relevant and interesting for everybody that comes in. And there are some collection areas that need some special attention as well, mostly areas that are more sensitive to obsolescence, like health and science topics. Oh, one other thing. There is a decrease in the services and charges category of 15.93%. That is because the maintenance costs of the discovery layer that we're currently implementing are much lower than the first year startup costs, and that's pretty normal. But the communication strategy, it's another one that's not set by our department, but those costs are projected to increase about $1,400, which is 23%. For the computer centers expenditures, again, we see the wages and fringe benefits increase costs, in this instance, 13.82% and 11.63% respectively. Overtime does have a proposed increase, which reflects, again, the use of the line item in fiscal year 24. This was, again, largely due to responding to outreach requests. We got a lot of requests, some of them we didn't have a whole lot of lead time for, and we wanted to make sure to get out there as much as possible. That's another part of the outreach strategy that we have been evaluating. But our computer expenditures category should decrease significantly since we're procuring durable supplies in fiscal year 24 that should last us through fiscal year 25. And then lastly here for conferences, training, and dues, we have a proposed increase of about $500 to a total line item budget of $1,000. And that should just cover a more comprehensive professional development strategy and opportunities. The ways that the computer center have been used, the way that that has evolved over the last 5 to 10 years is quite a bit. There's a lot of change there, and we just want to make sure that we're able to serve our residents as best we can and be well informed. So with revenues, I wish there were more increases to report here, but I think everybody feels that way. But revenues are projected to be pretty stable. We expect the county's aid to decrease by less than $1,000, and we believe there may be a small increase in the amount of fines and fees collected. And as stated in the slide, we're not currently charging overdue fines, which is the new standard practice really for the greater DMV and for most cities at this point. That's a very quickly increasing trend. So the most of the funds that come into this line item or this revenue source are actually replacing lost and damaged materials. And it may be that more patrons will want to clear their accounts when the new facility opens so that they can take full advantage of it. But we do also work with residents to make sure that services are as accessible as possible regardless. Our capital improvement plan budget is, again, almost entirely the library and community center redevelopment project. The remaining funds are expected to be spent in fiscal year 25, and that includes the $2.5 million in cable grants, $125,000 for the state grant, $500,000 from the ARPA fund, and then $75,000 as a digital inclusion grant. The proposed budget includes adding contingency funds from the unassigned reserve totaling about $600,000, and staff have included a recommendation during the ARPA presentation for another $500,000 in ARPA funds to the project. We don't currently have anything budgeted for this project beyond fiscal year 25, as we do expect construction to conclude before fiscal year 26 begins. The only other item here is the userful software, which is a little bit of a misnomer because sometimes there is a little bit of hardware that comes in as well, depending on what year it is and what the needs are. But either way, this covers the system that we use to make computers available to the public in the computer center that fulfill our security and end user requirements. This was previously done in a 3-year contract, but we've been doing 1-year extensions while in our interim facilities, and we're hoping to go back to a 3-year contract once we're in the new facility, since we do get a very modest discount, but a discount is a discount. So we have an ambitious fiscal year 25 planned on top of our capital project completion. And I think we're going to touch on every council priority item. From advancing a community of belonging. Again, we're going back to collection development, continue to emphasize procurement of titles that are culturally, socially, linguistically, and thematically inclusive for all of our residents and all their ages. It is a tall order, but we're doing the best we can with what we have, and we try to go wide where we can't go deep. For fiscally sustainable government, I do believe that our discovery layer, Aspen Discovery, can fall under here because it is going to make subscription sources more easily searchable within the catalog itself. And so that makes these dollars that we're investing in them work a little bit harder for us. With environmentally sustainable community, again, with our redevelopment project and the LEED Gold certification that falls under this. And with engaged, responsive, service-oriented government, as we are preparing to open a new facility, there are several new policies to develop and resources to line up, including a program room use policy, a room reservation service for study rooms, and a comprehensive outreach plan as well to connect with residents and encourage everybody to come back when we get back to their original site. We're currently using our weekly staff meetings to revisit and refine our existing policies, and we're looking forward to getting to these new items in fiscal year 25. And then for the community development for an improved and equitable quality of life, we do believe the redevelopment project is going to vastly improve facilities. We know this, and address many accessibility issues with more space, enclosed spaces for people who need those, better ventilation, more light. We really envision it being like a third place for residents after home and work and school. So I mentioned earlier I would talk a little bit more about our FTEs later in the presentation. That's where this fits in. I think these are challenges for every department, so we're not unique here, but I do want to call out the implications and effects of both these factors and how we function. It is important for us, and I'm sure for every department, to compensate performers and vendors fairly. The performance we collaborate with are all highly skilled, and many of them are BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color, with material related to marginalized identities and cultures, which is especially important to compensate fairly. Collection development in multiple languages is expensive if you want to do it properly, because there is inherently some duplication there. For instance, when we buy books about health issues, that's something that transcends the English language, and we may need to purchase analogous titles in Spanish and French to make sure that more people have access to that information. It's also been very difficult to acquire books in Amharic. Most of our Amharic books were purchased by one of our part-time staff on her annual trips to visit family in Ethiopia. Our distributors just don't import these titles, and it requires a lot of staff time and departmental funding to seek those out. I do want to give a shout out to the Friends of the Library here for their advocacy and fundraising. They do a really wonderful job, and they're the primary funders of a few of our programs, freeing up some funding for additional programs out of our general fund allotment. And we have a book sale coming up on May 18th as well, so everyone can stock up for summer vacations and staycations. With regards to FTEs, again, you'll recall our very busy slide detailing all of our services and programs. Everyone's busy, like with a capital B, like so many other people in the city. We just have a lot of stuff that we're trying to do. And we've been taking a close look at our programs to make sure that our time and energy, which are both finite resources just like money is, are being used wisely. So we've tabled some new programs to give folks a chance to breathe, and that's not a substitute for more people. The good news is that our base level is already pretty great. We just always want to be doing more. And I'm happy to take questions.
Awesome. Councilmember Fulcher.
I really appreciate the increasing of your trainings. I think it's really important that that library that we're going to open, that we stay really relevant. And it's hard because kids move fast. So if you wouldn't mind, can you explain a little more about the relationship with the Friends of the Library and how they support you?
Sure. So the Friends of the Library, their primary mission is to advocate for the library and to help us fundraise. And they do a really wonderful job with that. The book sales, I think, are the most visible thing that they do. But there are a lot of projects kind of all around town that they do with the library. A lot of the poetry stuff is attributed to them, the poetry around town, as well as the little free libraries. So that's sort of an informal part of our partnership. But most of the fundraising efforts go towards programs for the library. So like they cover our performers that we have during neighborhood circle time. They cover Spanish circle time. And they take funding requests really every month that they have a meeting to see if there's anything that we need that our budget can't address, or that we want to be able to use city funds for something else.
And then for the library aid from the county, How is that? Do you know how they come up with that? I know that's
That is a wonderful question that I wish I had more detailed information about. I can go back to some of my previous notes. I had been working fairly closely with a county council liaison on this to try to advocate for more funding and to figure out if it made more sense for us to be looped in with the rest of city services in terms of all the tax duplication work that happened. She unfortunately left county council not too long ago, so yeah, I need to go back to my notes, but there is a very complicated funding formula that I can dig back up for you.
Do you have a feel for how many people using the library are Tacoma Park residents versus non-Tacoma Park residents?
Yeah, I mean, the vast majority of library card holders are Tacoma Park residents. I mean, and I say vast, I don't know that it would necessarily be vast. I'd have to double check those numbers, but of our card holders, at least 2/3 are probably city residents. We do have a lot of people within the county that also use the library and have library cards. And then especially with our current location now right on the county line with PG County, we've had a lot of people come in to get cards that are non-residents. And that is one of the things that the Friends have been helping us with is underwriting a lot of those non-resident fees.
What's the closest Prince George's County library to us? Is it Hyattsville?
I think it is Hyattsville.
That's far.
Yeah.
It is.
And I will just add, as part of the Tacoma Langley sector plan, at one point, I believe if I'm remembering this correctly, as part of some of the public benefits that they were trying to advocate for on the Prince George's. So Montgomery County has its Tacoma Langley sector plan, Prince George's has theirs. They were trying to advocate for library resources on their side. So it's.
I will not talk about interjurisdictional cooperation for the benefit of the honor of this council at this particular time. That's what I'll say about that.
Well, I will say that it was identified as a need.
Yes, ages ago.
Ages a long time ago. Councilmember Small.
Thank you, Mayor. I did want to tilt toward the profound impact that having the library over there has been. And without getting too far into it and maybe casting shade and not aspersions, there's when I first moved here and I was trying to get a prescription, and I told people I lived in Tacoma Park. I'm like, this was like 15 years ago or whatever. So powers that be still thought we were dingy. We weren't super ooh-ah yet. And I told the guy, told the doctor who is now retired where I lived, and he said, "Oh, it's next to Langley Park. I understand." And I was like, "What? That's horrible and sort of racist." But he was an old dude, so to watch the transition, the socioeconomic transition of reality over in that particular area immediately across the street from Ward 6, without a substantive and wholehearted attempt by the county to ameliorate any of the conditions that are over there, including lack of access to educational items that we are providing, is really kind of an indictment on a long-term opinion of people in, it may even be quasi-racist because it's Hispanic people, it's undocumented people, it's degraded people. As a result of those realities, we've got other issues over there, and I just applaud your efforts in attempting to make sure that your programming is as reflective of the character of both neighborhoods. I genuinely don't know what we would do without the library and it being right across the street because Joel's gotten ravenous for those medium-sized books, and those are expensive. So I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Filcher.
I just want to add on to Councilmember Small's sort of what he's talking about. Is it going to be hard to come back to Ward 1 after what you've been experienced and the people that you've been able to touch being over in Ward 6?
It is going to be an interesting transition. They're very different areas, and I know that I had the good fortune of working on this site for a while before moving over, so I can kind of speak to both places. I definitely use Spanish a whole lot more in our new location, and I don't know. I would hope that people would follow us back over here, but you know, it's hard to get a read on how many would. I do think and I know that we've reached a lot of new people in the new area, and it's not very far away, but it is very far away. It's a little of both.
Thankfully, I took, to your benefit, your esteemed city manager around over by the library at exactly 1:30 in the afternoon. So he understands that it's not necessarily an easy thing to say that people are just going to come with you. But again, appreciate it both to you for doing that and to you for really being really good at your job. Anecdotally, I've even been solicited by members of your staff who just extolled your virtues to the high heavens.
Oh, thank you.
So thank you, Councilmember Small. Couple quick points. And it could just be, my memory is escaping me. The total cost of the library construction is an estimated, 13?
Inclusive of design and soft costs and everything, I don't have my SIP in front, or I don't have.
It's okay. I
additional in
should
front of
know
me, but
this.
It's about
14 and a half.
It's about 14 and a half, okay. And I think one of the things that, that I have been asked, and I just want to make sure that folks understand, is the fact that we haven't taken out any additional borrowed money, which, you know, is something that I think is important for people. You know, realistically, the cost associated with the library, just because we started this before the pandemic and we happened to have a pandemic and stuff just got more expensive. But the actual cost to the city taxpayer dollar has not changed from the original bond amount that we requested. And so I just highlight that to say thank you all so much for all of your due diligence with trying to identify additional funding sources, so either state grants or cable grants or ARPA funds or other grants to try to fill the gap. One question I do have, because I want to make sure that I'm looking at this correctly. So the contingency funds from the unassigned reserve totaling $600,000, and we're proposing that $500,000 would come from ARPA. Where's the other 100?
It's two additional pots of contingency.
Oh,
So
okay.
600 plus 500.
Plus 500.
Coming from two different places. The
Okay.
600 is coming from unassigned reserve. It's a transfer that's proposed and that's included in the budget. The 500 is a recommendation from Deputy City Manager Bolduc during his presentation to add another 5.
Thank you.
Yeah, so it would be a total contingency of
1.1
1.1 million. right?
Okay, because I was like, I see the 600, and I just wanted to make sure I was straight. Okay, so it would be total contingency 1.1, 600 was part of the original contingency, 500 is what we're advocating for now. Okay, got it. And one other question. I know that when and it's kind of picking up on the conversation that we just had with Councilmember Small, how long is our lease for the Salvation Army space?
It should run through September 2025, so it should get us through.
Through the construction.
Yes.
And I know at one point, there were discussions about whether or not this is something that this space is something that we might want to consider holding on for a little while longer, given other construction projects. But given that right now we're leased through September of 2025, realistically, we could have some of those conversations as part of the 2026 budget. But I do just want to make sure that we're keeping that in mind as well, and whether or not we want to, for various reasons, we've already retrofitted the space, and so, you know, if we do start to do things like police renovation, all of that stuff that we're talking, the atrium fill-in, and whether or not we need alternative office space, we may want to have some conversations and think about for the 26 budget, holding on to that lease a little while longer to give us that added space. And the only other thing that I just want to say is thank you, thank you, thank you. You all are everywhere, and your passion and the passion of your staff, it shows. From every table sitting to every advertisement of the Fix-It Clinic. I would have never known that that Fix-It Clinic was going to be so popular, but it is spreading like wildfire on listservs. Like, people love that thing. And so I'm just really grateful that you all are so committed, not only to inspiring our youth to read, but engaging our community to learn things and to help one another. So thank you and all of the staff for all that you do.
Thank you. I will make sure that the staff hear all that.
And I'm so excited that it looks like we have another wall. Every time I see something going up, I was like, wait a minute, there's another wall. We're almost there, we're getting close.
I'm ready, very ready.
Awesome, thank you so much.
Thanks.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Councilmember Honzak has a
I'm
light.
sorry, I realized I had a question, and I'm sorry to come after you, Mayor. After that nice closure, I didn't want to go without, you know, your second to last bullet on FTEs about your youth services department. I just wanted to say this in the public while we've got you on the budget. I feel like I'm reading here that you're saying that you could really use more capacity to manage youth. And I'm curious, because we need to think about that as we go through reconciliation. Can you speak to that a little bit more? How you see that capacity as compared to, like, are you getting more youth in this space than you had in your other, you know, in your other library, for example, or were you already at capacity in the other library? Can you just speak to that a little bit and how you see that in the budget?
Sure. I do think that we were pretty much at capacity before we moved, and then we moved and had to retool a lot of things and come up with a lot of new programs to make sure that we were reaching our new audience. And of course, we have a lot of people that followed us over there from here, but a lot of new people that led us to understand that we needed to be offering some other things. And a lot of that is very youth-centered and family-centered. I think it's also important just to underline like how much time goes into planning a new program. It is a lot of time, and it's usually like days, if not weeks, sometimes months, planning a program before it actually happens. And the program happens so fast that you don't see all the work that happens behind the scenes. And a lot of that requires a lot of time and space to be thoughtful and to really think through logistics and planning and being deliberate and careful with city resources. That requires a lot of off-desk time that our youth services staff just don't have a ton of off-desk time to be planning a lot of new programs. So I think that with them in particular meeting so many different needs, because you know, our adult services folks, myself included, like, there's certainly a very wide range of ages and needs and different places in life, but like our youth services staff cover so many different collection areas. You know, we have picture books, beginning readers, our young adult collection, middle grade things. Like there's so many developmental ages and stages that they're having to plan for and address in you know, a very professional and informed way, and that takes a lot of time too. There's a lot of professional development involved there, and that's why that sort of sub-department within our department has the most professional staff in it as well.
Okay, great, thank you so much. All right, so I'm gonna do a quick time check to see if folks wanna take the break. Well, since we're at the halfway mark, we have recreation and we have housing and community development. Let's do rec. All right, let's roll on. Come on down, Greg. You're the next contestant on The Budget is Right.
apologies for using the chair, but I don't have any cartilage in my knees.
Oh, no.
So I can't stand for long, but Thursday, hopefully it'll be fixed. All right. Good evening, Mayor and members of council. I'm Greg Clark, and I am here to present the Recreation Department's FY25 budget. All right, Recreation's mission. Recreation enhances the quality of life in the city by providing creative, diverse, and safe programs for all ages, everyone from tots to seniors. Our staff work in collaboration with youth, seniors, and community groups to identify new programs that residents may be interested in. We deliver these programs through 8 divisions within our department, which are our administration division, our youth outreach division, which our teen programs are in, Tacoma Park Recreation Center, which is on New Hampshire Avenue, our community programs division, which our sports and special events are housed, athletic fields and facilities, our camps, before and after school programs, and the community center, which is this building here on Maple. FY24 accomplishments. The Recreation Department has accomplished a lot this fiscal year. A few things that are noteworthy to highlight are we've had an increase in our Winter Basketball League, approximately 160 new participants for this fiscal year. Our Futsal League, which takes place in the gym on New Hampshire Avenue, we've had about 30 new participants in that. We've executed several successful citywide special events, which were our Egg Hunt, which we approximately 700 in attendance, our Monster Bash, approximately 800 in attendance, and several outdoor movies for the community. In addition, we've also purchased a 15-passenger van this fiscal year with a new lift. And lastly, we're nearing completion of adjusting the administrative regulations for facilities, which is anticipated to be completed this coming June. Department revenues. Participation in recreation programs have increased in FY24, and this is evident by the increase in revenue for our department has received and expecting to receive by the end of the fiscal year. The top left shows the department, what department was budgeted for and anticipated receiving in FY24, which was about $444,000. Working with staff, we've determined that we can exceed that and expect approximately $561,000 in revenue by June 30th, which is a 26% increase over what was originally budgeted for the fiscal year. I want to make note that this number does not include the $150,000 reimbursement for recreation scholarships, which I'll talk about in a little bit and go into detail. Once we do include the ARPA reimbursement, that'll take recreation revenues for this particular fiscal year for FY24 to about $711,000. The department anticipates continued increases in registration and are proposing to bring in an approximately $584,000, which is in FY25. And I would like to highlight that that does not include $150,000 for ARPA reimbursement, which we will not receive for FY25. The city receives an additional $85,000 from the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission for operation of the Recreation Center, which is not included in these totals either. These totals that I'm mentioning before you are just the totals for programming and services that we actually offer. Recreation scholarships. Prior to the pandemic, the department scholarships, which is calculated as a loss in revenue, totaled approximately $20,000 to $30,000 per fiscal year. These scholarships were only 20%, 50%, and 70%. Again, this was pre-pandemic. And reductions were sort of standard with the Housing and Urban Development income limits, which determine median family income and are updated annually. So that's how we determine who's eligible for a scholarship. Since the pandemic, the city decided to offer 100% scholarships for residents that needed assistance. And as you can see by the numbers above, there are a good number of residents that utilize the 100% scholarship option. In FY25, the city will not receive an ARPA reimbursement of $150,000, which I mentioned, like the previous 2 fiscal years. Therefore, the proposed revenue of $584,000 is actually realistic because staff actually accounts for a loss in revenue for most of our programs for scholarships for those that participate. Prior to the pandemic, our department revenues were approaching $700,000. So I would like to say that our participation in programs is actually reaching pre-pandemic levels, so which is a good thing. Expenditures, not a lot to report, but Recreation Department expenditures for FY25 sort of remain steady. There's a slight increase of 5.9% compared to expenses for this current fiscal year, which is FY24. This slide is a continuation of our department expenditures and further breaks down where the money is being spent. I would like to note that the department experienced the savings of about $37,000 in our special programs, special events and programs departments for FY24. And the savings were mainly due to space restrictions. Staff spent less on programs and actual program instructors for that. Staffing. The department actually experienced a reduction in staffing for FY25. The city's passport specialist is being transferred to city admin. And we've also had a reduction in part-time staff due to construction and needing less space and things of that nature. However, we do anticipate needing those additional FTEs once construction has been completed. Major projects and services. The department offers a host of services and programs for city residents. A few of our major projects and services are listed on this slide. We pride ourselves in offering a variety of well-attended services from tots to seniors, developmental classes, art, sports, health, wellness, and fitness, and a host of citywide special events. Our most popular offerings are our child care program, recently licensed camps, including our teen camps, which I can proudly say that this year for this coming summer, our teen camps fill within the first 2 weeks of opening. And that has never happened since I've been here, which is really good. Senior line dance and hip hop dance fitness, and our youth sports offerings. The Community Partnership Program. Our department oversees approximately $55,000 of the city's Community Partnership Program, which I'll call CP2. The CP2 program was designed to provide ongoing support for programming that furthers council priorities. Previous recipients of the CP2 grants included Man Up, Let's Play America, and the Lunch and Learn programs. Current funding for FY25 is recommended at the same level for FY24, which is $55,000. Council priority items. I'm proud to say that, recreation program falls under the council priority subsection of advancing a community of belonging. It has been our goal to identify and prioritize programming needs in the community and develop approaches to meet those needs. So all of our programs are open to everyone and fall up under that category. Emerging issues and challenges. Team program staffing. The department and country, for that matter, has experienced a challenge in finding staff to work with teams. The hours and short time that we need staff are not ideal. Previously, the department had held a part-time career position that could have been used to secure a higher level staff to work with our team program. Having the position would ensure consistency for our young people, consistency and assistance for our current team manager, and help to build a robust team program that would attract a host of teams from across the city. If you remember a few months ago, we had to cancel our summer youth employment program because we didn't have the staff to actually staff it for this particular summer coming up. We were going to try and do some things to try to make sure that we held the program next year. But finding staff to staff the teen lounge with those hours, has been extremely challenging for quite some time. The second is programming space during construction is another challenge. We've included in our FY25 budget additional funds for the community use of public facilities to rent space in the schools. So if we don't have space here in this building to hold programs, we can go to one of the local schools and have space in there. Recreation scholarships, as I mentioned, we will not be receiving the $150,000 reimbursement from ARPA for FY25. So all of the scholarships that we award to residents will be a loss in revenue. And again, I've already built in the anticipated loss of revenue. So we're expecting approximately 584,000, I believe, of revenue for FY25. Lastly, this one just came about while I was at the Maryland Recreation and Parks Association conference. Staff met with the PTAs of Tacoma Park Elementary School and Piney Branch Elementary School, and they would like for us to partner with the Recreation Department to host, I want to say, clubs for kids after school. The Recreation Department or the city would provide the instructors and actually receive the revenue for the classes, and the kids would get an opportunity to participate in the clubs or classes. They anticipate about 25 kids per club, twice per year at each school, which will last about 6 weeks. In addition, they would speak with teachers in the school to actually teach the clubs and run the clubs, so the teachers will actually get paid as well. So that program, we're anticipating being about an additional $20,000, but it will bring about approximately $30,000 in revenue if filled. And that concludes my budget presentation for FY25 for the Recreation Department.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Small.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, first of all, in particular, apologies for making the strange, that would have to be the strangest faces at you guys who have to be back there. Like, seriously, apologies. Notwithstanding that, I'm going to power through this whole thing for each of the departments. The one thing that I wanted to hit on here, which is something that I discussed with both the mayor and kind of tangentially with the senior city staff, is the what seemed like some obvious silos with regards to FTEs and or job descriptions because of the potential opportunity for cross collaborations or reorganizations in the city government. In particular, it would seem to me like, and I said this during a previous presentation, that facilities and fields require a flexibility that staffing doesn't necessarily warrant, because there are FTEs doing other things in other departments that maybe cross collaboratively could be under rec. Additionally, it would seem to me like the prospects of driving or other things in other departments may have an opportunity for people who are willing to be hourly bodies or bodies that will satisfactorily address needs for teen staffing or anything else, would seem like there may be some opportunities internally for that. I leave that to you and our esteemed city manager and other departments to kind of think about that, but I would encourage the fact that it does seem like there's some cross-collaborative opportunities with rec and the library, or the library and the teen program and lots of other things, which seem like really cool opportunities to be explored, even in the short term, and effectively reorganizing some efficiencies that may reduce overall compensation needs. Notwithstanding that, you guys are doing, in my estimate, the best work outside of our comm staff in this esteemed organization and city corpus. The change in the teen program and in the kids that I personally know and operate with, just because of the proximity of my own children to them, has been really noted and phenomenal. The increases in the basketball program and some of the other programming that specifically that Renita has envisioned, I think should be encouraged. And I just wanted to shout out again the futsal program, because although we're not in it anymore, it's seriously the most coveted program of its kind in the area. And people come from other counties and drive a long way to come play futsal here, and it is not a joke. And so it was where some of the best kids in like the 7th and 8th grade at least cut their teeth and realized that they were not as good as they thought they were. And so I just encourage, like, the fact that it's expanded is awesome. I am the biggest advocate for a new rec center, the biggest advocate for conceiving of some sports tourism opportunities, just because of the dearth of opportunities around here. I'm willing to explore annexing flat land, any place to give to you guys to operate. But I did want to highlight the fact that I do think that there's some operational efficiencies, at least between the first of the 3 departments who have presented here, if not all of them. And I would probably know more about whether or not there's some viability for other things. But I know that he is phenomenally understaffed. So I would think about doing Scrooge McDuck style for all of these departments here and working smarter, not harder, because it's really the heart and soul of this city and does the best work. Best. And I really like our police department, but like best.
Thank you, Councilmember Small. Councilmember Fulcher?
For the additional $85,020 we get from MNC PPC, how did that amount come to be?
Well, the amount actually started off higher, and it was a payment that Park and Planning paid the city for when the city, I'm gonna say leased, if I'm saying that right. When the city leased the recreation center from the county, it was the county's payment to the city. It was actually 126, I believe, started off at when I first got here, and that was their payment to us for actually running the facility, to help run the facility. Once we took ownership of the facility, the payments, we worked out an agreement, MOU, the payments will continue, and we received $85,000. The payments went down prior to the city taking ownership of the building. So they've been $85,000 for quite some time.
Is there any sort of level of programming that you're expected to be providing in order to get that amount, or it doesn't matter what you're doing there?
No.
Okay. I think it's really great that you're looking at that after-school program partnership, especially because the way that recreation does everything here is more inclusive than the expense of those programs that are currently being run by, outside partners. And I just wasn't clear, and I sent my message to the city manager's office, and now you guys won't need to answer this. Are you currently seeking another teen staff employee right now, or is that the one that you're waiting on?
Yeah, we've had announcements out for quite some time, and when we get someone, like we've had someone, there are folks that apply. Well, you have to be 21.
Yep.
In order to work.
I know
there.
I've advocated for other people to go do that job.
Yeah. But we just haven't been able to find anyone to actually fill those hours. The hours are sort of weird because you have to be available from 3 to 6 because that's what the high time of our teen lounge is, and it's really tough to find someone to work those hours.
I'm obviously a big Haven fan and got my 2 weeks for my daughter into the teen camp, and am feeling even better about that now that I'm hearing that it's completely enrolled. So I appreciate everything that Recreation's doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Gibson.
Yes, I'm glad my colleague brought up the small amount that the county is providing for those two fields, and there is no in lieu of payment for recreation, which there could very well be, because we are paying the county for recreation services as well as the city, and maybe that's something that I think it's been considered. I don't know how likely it is that the county would actually consider us, because we are providing a lot. And that I sort of recall, Greg, you're mentioning back in a previous presentation about the cost or the fees that the county was charging for various things and the various programs, or whether it was camps or what it was, versus us. So I guess I'm wondering what is, besides proximity, do we offer more different kinds of programs? What do we offer differently other than the proximity that it's right here?
I believe the previous presentation where I mentioned that was for the admin regulation for facilities, when we compared the actual facility costs with the facilities that were in and around us.
Mm-hmm.
The county used to, when I first got here, they operated only a club program at the middle school.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, they don't offer recreation programs here in the city. They leave that to the city, the city recreation department.
Or are they assuming that we're going to use like the new Aqua Center in Silver Spring and things like that? I mean, I guess you can't know what they're assuming. I'm just raising the question whether there's nothing that they're offering that's competitive, that's close by, I guess.
Long Branch would be the closest facility that they have, I believe.
And I think it's important to keep in mind, like, one, the county doesn't, in terms of a tax dupe question, they don't reimburse any municipality for recreation buildings or infrastructure. Like, they don't do that. You, as part of tax dupe, you get parks. You get some proportion of county monies based on the parks that you manage, but they don't do buildings. We're in another place where we're unique in that the rec center that is on New Hampshire Avenue, we managed for the county. And so I think that aspects of that prior relationship still stands, which is why we get a payment for this building, but it was because we were managing it while it was owned by the county. And I don't think that that is the case for other municipalities that run their own recreation centers. It's not the case that the county offers any kind of payments. Now, that's something we could talk about when we talk about tax dupe. But I do just want to make sure that folks understand that our payment that we receive from the county for the rec center is unique in that it is a remnant of when the county owned the rec center and we managed it on their behalf.
As another part of that, I guess you mentioned that we don't receive any kind of compensation for facilities, other than the oddity of the rec center, which we maintain. Is there, I guess, again, it goes to the tax dupe question, because even if there weren't in lieu payments for facilities, there might be in lieu payments for staffing, which is the way the police in lieu payments are. If I understand correctly, it's having to do paying for the number of officers that the county would do. So I'm just raising a concern that we're paying twice. We pay the county for some recreational services that we're not using.
Yeah, and Councilmember Gibson, I think you're right. I mean, I think one of the bigger things is that, residents pay not only county taxes, but you pay a recreation tax, and we don't get any of that. It'd be great if we did. So I agree with you, and I think as we are getting ready to, I believe in 26, next year, will be the year in which we could start reopening negotiations with the county regarding tax dupe. But
We don't know about anything unfair right now.
wait, Councilmember Honzak.
Yeah, that touches right on, segues into what a couple things that I wanted to ask you. Thank you, first of all, because I'm going to be a pointed comment just so that I can get some clarity on behalf of my ward in particular. I think you guys just do an amazing job and your programming is excellent. As you know, Ward 5 is unusual in that we are the only ward where the vast majority of our youth, or at least 2/3 of them, are zoned anyway to schools that sit outside of this area. And therefore, when we're talking about elementary school and middle school kids, they're not going usually to Tacoma Park Community Center after school to do their after school programming or before school programming or take advantage of our amazing youth council, for example, which I think is so incredible. And frankly, I've been sad as a parent with 3 kids that it's been phenomenally difficult for me to just figure out how to get my kids here to ever take advantage of anything that we have, including the library. And I think it's one of the reasons that Ward 5 residents frequently feel that we struggle with how our tax dollars get spent. And it's not true. It is really important to acknowledge that Essex House residents are zoned to our Tacoma Park schools. So we're split in half as a ward, and representing all of those interests is tricky. If the city decides, for example, to do something that I would strongly support, which is, for example, you said, you might forge a relationship with TPS and PBS after-school programming. I guess I would just beg and urge you to consider the balance and allocation of resources, of the city's resources, for all the youth of the city in proportion to how we think they're getting met. Maybe the county's actually filling that niche well enough, with the services they're providing. They've done a lot of free things over the last year that we haven't been able to afford to do. But you know, when we think about the allocation of tax dollars, and the fact that we have a lot of our lowest income residents living in my ward, where the juveniles and young people and families are very, very impacted by post-pandemic challenges, I just beg for us to consider that balance of how could we, for example, find some creative ways to get some buses from those schools into our Tacoma Park rec programming? Is that an efficient solution? Is it needed? I'm just asking for those things to be explored, and I offer myself as a resource, even if I am not on council next year, to continue to explore and unpack those issues, because I just think it's so very, very important for the residents of Ward 5 and for the city. And sort of segueing then to the community partnership program. It is my understanding that, and I'm trying to find it in the budget book. I had a budget meeting, you know, with the city manager, that the $55,000 that was spread last year across Man Up, Let's Play America, and Lunch and Learn. Can you reiterate that? It is my understanding that is exactly the same total amount that we had last year, and that is what we're proposing for this year in the same allocation?
Yeah, yes,
Is
the
that correct?
55,000 was the total allocation that we've
Yes.
had for 2024. But historically, we've spent the money on those three organizations. It was more in there when in the initial years than we've had the past several years. So yeah, last year was just 55,000.
But is it correct that the proposal for this year is the same as last year still? That's still the case,
55,000.
but the allocation for the individual groups that are in there is also.
I can't.
You can't say, okay,
I can't,
okay,
yeah.
I just
Yeah.
wanted to triple check, because that's what that's what we discussed in the one-on-ones. Okay.
Yeah.
The program is
But-
a
but-
grant program, and so through the application process and through the decision-making rubric, the allocations are determined.
I see,
It's
okay.
a
so
competitive
not-
grant.
It's okay, it's not at fixed dollar amounts for,
Right.
okay, okay. Thank you for that clarity. And I think that's all, unless, I do want to give you the opportunity either to respond to the statement that I made about the allocation of resources across the wards and the two schools, if you had anything to say about that right now.
Right. It's something that we can definitely take a look at to see how we can reach more Ward 5 residents. I can meet with my staff. I know we previously, and this was of course all pre-pandemic, we had a program where our teen program, we took programs to different neighborhoods and things like that. When we had a youth services actual manager, we had programs in different buildings in several wards. So that's something that we can take a look at and see if we can find a way to get back to doing some of that stuff. Now, without some of the resources that we've had running those, we just have to be really creative on how to get that done.
Councilmember Gibson?
I'm remembering, I believe, the Play Lady making a soliciting that they're talking about their increased the increased costs of the program that they have been offering, and so presumably any of these, even if we were to continue the same three programs, their costs may have increased. So I'm just kind of flagging that as something that maybe I would consider for an increase, partly because it's my belief that organizations, civic organizations, volunteer organizations, that we're getting a lot more for our money. In other words, we're leveraging not only our money but their volunteer time. So it's just something that I'm generally in favor of, and hope that it might be considered.
So, Councilmember Gibson, I just want to make sure I'm clear, and I just want to make sure that everybody's clear. This is a competitive grant, so And I just want to make sure I'm clear of that. So it's a competitive grant. There's no guarantee that any of the folks that have received the grant in the past would receive the grants this time around. Also, is no guarantee that we can know ahead of time how much each awardee, when they're selected, would receive. Now, if what we're looking
Better write a
for,
good one.
and so if what we are proposing is just overall 55,000 is not enough, and we have such a wide slate of programs that we think maybe want to apply for this money or may be eligible for this money, then when we're talking about reconciliation, by all means, propose an increase for this grant program for that purpose. But I do just want to make sure that that everybody understands that we're not able to, through this program, earmark monies or amounts of monies for any particular group.
Perhaps I was misunderstood. No, that's exactly what I was suggesting, that
Okay.
overall, the recipient's costs, whoever they might be, may go up.
Yeah.
For example, Let's Play America. And that the other main point that I think is worth thinking about is how much further our dollar goes when we use volunteer organizations.
Oh, thank you so much, Councilmember Gibson, for clarifying. So is that something you want to propose for reconciliation now, or would you like to hold off until Wednesday?
I'll hold off and, yeah.
Okay, no worries. All right. So thank you so much, Greg, for all of the wonderful work that you all are doing. I am so excited that so many of our teens are taking advantage of the programs that we have, and it's a true testament to your staff. Haven is amazing with the youth, and so I am just ecstatic. One question I do have, though, in terms of us, I personally want to ensure that any child in our community that wants to participate in a youth camp can get in. Like, cost should not be a limiting factor for youth in our community that want to have something positive to do after school. But we are operating at a loss, and I was wondering, what information do we collect from the families that we're offering the scholarships to? Are there opportunities for us to start thinking about third-party or grant funds that we may want to start? I'm just thinking about the fact that the governor is pushing so much youth related programming and money out there that us operating at this deficit may actually be a really good sell for some grant money, so where we could say, for staffing and things, that we want to provide this free opportunity for youth in our programs. Are you all seeing anything like that, or is it something that the council should try to look out for or advocate for?
Yeah, I haven't. We've actually had a discussion in our directors group across the state, because everybody does different things and does it different ways. Not too many people do it the way that we do it. A lot of jurisdictions actually allocate a certain amount of money from the budget to the grant program, to the scholarships program, and whittle down from that particular number. I actually like the way that we do it, because it ensures that everyone that is in need can actually partake, which is the goal. But since we've added the 100%, the numbers have just skyrocketed,
Right.
Which actually shows the need that we have in the community. Yes, if there's a way for us to supplement the funds, through grants, I'm not sure if there are any out there, or maybe we can be creative and find another grant to, for something for staffing or something like that, to actually supplement those programs. The two programs that use the most scholarship funding is our camps and our after-school program.
Okay.
So, which for parents, that's the greatest need, which is childcare.
Yep. And I think that's the biggest issue that plagues our entire region is the
Right.
fact that people are in need of affordable childcare.
Right.
And so, no, I thank you for expanding on that because that's something that I'm really trying to think through of things that we may want to consider, particularly when we are having conversations with members of the state or working with our state delegation to really try to uplift these kinds of initiatives because they are more grassroots approaches to trying to tackle some of the challenging issues related to childcare that are often really difficult to address at the state level beyond like providing individual providers with
Right.
resources. And sometimes aftercare programs or camps aren't labeled child care,
Right.
oddly enough.
Which they are.
Which they are, but they sometimes don't meet that category. So that's really helpful to hear that we're providing the service, but it kind of has my brain thinking of some ways we may want to make sure that we have the staff to
Right.
support the volume of kids that we know need support in our community. And so I think that is it for you. Thank you so
you.
much, and I hope your knee gets the surgery, everything goes well, and
Well, it's just injections.
it's just injections.
A special,
Okay.
Yeah,
I don't know why I was like
gel.
a whole replacement.
Yeah. Well, apparently I'm too young for the replacement, so. But thank you.
We have people at the diocese getting things replaced, so they've recently gotten things replaced. So I have replacement on the mind.
Right.
Well, I hope you feel better.
Thank you.
All right. So we're gonna give folks. Sorry, Ira. Can we get 10 minutes? All right. We're gonna give everyone a quick 10-minute break, and then we will finish up with our last work session on housing and community development. Reconvene for our last work session of the evening, Housing and Community Development. And we have our HCD Director, Mr. Cowler, who will walk us through his presentation.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mayor Searcy, members of council, Ira Cowler, Director, Housing Community Development. Tonight I am here to present our department overview of our FY 2025 proposed budget. I'll start with our mission statement. So the Housing Community Development Department enhances the safety, livability, and resilience of Tacoma Park and its residents by providing diverse, high-quality housing opportunities, developing thoughtful and purposeful public areas, enhancing access to reliable and sustainable transportation options for pedestrians, cyclists, and motorists, enabling and promoting vibrant commercial spaces, protecting the city's physical infrastructure and natural resources, increasing access to supporting services and resources, and enhancing creative expression through the arts. Fear not, I won't read through every single slide, but this one's a very important one to us. This mission was developed in-house by our staff over the past few years, and this statement, in partnership with our various strategic planning documents, kind of serves as the basis for the budget priorities, programs, and projects that you'll see here in the coming slides. All right, so the next two slides provide a very broad overview of our core divisions within HCD. Each of these divisions manages a large portfolio of work, but within these slides, we provided a quick highlight of some of our biggest pieces of work. We'll also explore these divisions and their FY25 priorities in detail later in the presentation. I'll also note that these 6 divisions, Planning and Development Services, Housing, Code Enforcement, HCD Administration, Economic Development, and Arts and Humanities, are presented here in no particular order except the order that they're in the budget book. So as you go through and follow along in the budget book, this will be the order that you see the divisions. So firstly, HCD Administration obviously oversees the core functions for the department. This is department operations, as well as our stakeholder partnerships, both with local organizations, elected officials, federal, state, and other municipal governments. I'll also point out that within HCD Administration is where we oversee our grant administration, both internal and external funding, and within that, our quality of life programming and grant awards. Our Economic Development Division focuses on small business support, both technical assistance as well as access to capital, commercial corridor promotion and assistance, both through our commercial corridor service contracts as well as targeted commercial corridor development programming, and finally, public and private real estate development. Arts and Humanities Division manages both our Tacoma Arts Public Arts Series, which we'll talk about in more detail here in our successes in FY24, our Tacoma Park Poet Laureate, which I'll just quickly mention had a very successful FY24 as well, expanding programming in partnership with People's Books in Old Tacoma, as well as programs such as the Free Art Library, the Sidewalk Poetry, and other public art programming. Planning and Development Services is responsible for our long-range planning. This is both the various transit plans and roadway plans that you'll see throughout the budget and throughout our presentation, as well as sector plans, master plans, minor master plans, and the like. They're also responsible for the development review process, the city's involvement within the development review process, and finally the public space management plan. Our Housing Division oversees all aspects related to rental licensing and landlord-tenant affairs, including our Commission on Landlord-Tenant Affairs, as well as emergency rental assistance and other assistance programs for residents in need. And finally is our Code Enforcement Division, which was moved from the Police Department to HCD 2 years ago in fiscal year 2023. Oftentimes we think of this division in terms of the Property Maintenance Code, but they're also the sole staff responsible for enforcement of Tacoma Park's pioneering and unique environmental code, which includes the plastic straw and bag bans, the polystyrene ban, and the Safe Grow Act. This code continues to grow with items such as the recently passed gas-powered leaf blower ban. Code is responsible for enforcing these provisions and also providing public education on them. The Property Maintenance Code is established to ensure the health, safety, and wellness of Tacoma Park residents and also ensure the aesthetic character of our community. Code enforcement is responsible for identifying cases and engaging residents before violations become health and safety risks, which is the primary reason our actual citation level remains consistently low. Moving code into HCD has also allowed the division to effectively collaborate on quality of life issues. Okay, moving along to our staff summary here. So as you see, while positions have changed within our divisions, our department's full allotment of FTEs has remained consistent from FY24 to FY25. We'll get into that briefly and what those changes look like in a second. I'll just point out, as you see, our Code Enforcement Department over FY23 to 24 dropped. And to account for that, our Economic Development Division increased. This year, our Economic Development Division is decreasing, and our Planning and Development Services Division is being proposed to increase. So just to quickly walk through what that looks like on a staff level, you see this. I won't walk through all of it. I'll just point out some of the changes here. The first change you see is a proposed new transit planner position. This position, first of all, would not be funded through our HCD general fund revenues. Instead, would be funded through the Red Light Camera Fund, but housed in our Planning and Development Services Division. This transit planner, which we'll get into in more detail in the division priorities, but would be responsible for assisting with the engagement and community planning work around some of the ongoing transit, roadway, traffic calming redesign needs that council has both identified as a priority over the past year and that we've seen growing requests for as well over the past year. To account for that position, the economic development specialist position, which is currently unfilled, would not be filled and would not be budgeted for in FY 2025. And then the last piece I'll mention here, interns are not accounted for under our FTE position summaries, but I did just want to point out that when you look in the budget, we currently do have an active planning intern. That contract will run until January 2025, and then we are not proposing to renew that moving forward. Okay, lots of successes to highlight. I just wanted to summarize a few here in this slide. So firstly, you see new strategies for community engagement. Over the past year, we've been really excited to introduce innovative strategies for engagement around several of our planning efforts. Those strategies included increased use of technology in surveys and translation efforts, increased incentives to promote more equitable participation at in-person meetings. Secondly, under rental licensing and landlord-tenant policies, we did pass a new tenant displacement ordinance. We have planned new administrative regulations on rental fees. We've had a full-time landlord-tenant specialist on staff devoted primarily to working on our client intake and expanding our client intake and client intake responsiveness. We've also been able to start holding ongoing tenant association quarterly meetings. We are planning to roll out a new rental licensing platform, which will allow us to continue our focus over the past year on enhancing our licensing enforcement and monitoring efforts for key identified rental properties. The Public Space Management Plan, as hopefully everyone here is aware, the Public Space Management Plan, after 5 years of development, was adopted in November 2023. The plan includes both 36 initial recommendations for public space planning and processes within the city, but also provides the city with a public space management tool card and toolkit for analyzing public space management decisions moving forward. I also wanted to highlight our Tacoma Public Arts series, which was extremely successful and continues to be successful to this day. This includes our ongoing performances and screenings that occur here at the community center, as well as the exhibits that are hosted here. We've been averaging about 2 events a month, and to date, we've had 8 events this fiscal year with over 1,000 attendees, I believe. For the last 2 months, almost all of our events here in the auditorium have been not just standing room only, but standing room only where we've had to close the door because we'd be at risk of violating the kind of fire marshal capacity in this office. So tremendous success in those programs. I also want to highlight our roadway and bikeway planning work, We have multiple planning efforts that are approaching 100% design documents. So that means fully permitted sets of documents ready to go, ready to be implemented when the money is there. Those include multiple sections of the New Ave Bikeways, the Maple Avenue Connectivity Project, and the Met Branch Trail Project. As was alluded to in our record-setting meeting earlier this fiscal year, we've also successfully adopted a minor master plan amendment and look forward to now the hard work of working on those recommendations and working on that process. And lastly, these last 2, I'm very excited to highlight both our external grant funding success and our internal grant program, both of which are due to the new full-time grant coordinator that we were able to hire in the fall of 2023. If you recall, last year around this time, we initially had a part-time grant coordinator that was bumped up during the budget discussion and reconciliation to a full-time position. And that position has really greatly enhanced our efforts and ability, not just within HCD, but citywide, to identify, receive, and manage state and federal grant opportunities. I'll get into far more detail on that later in the presentation here. But I wanted to highlight, for example, the youth programming idea that was highlighted earlier will certainly be something that will be coming back to our grant coordinator with and gives us an ability to explore those options that we didn't have in years past. And that grant coordinator position has also been instrumental in us rolling out several new internal grant-funded programs over the past year, including our Open for Business grant, our Multifamily Building Improvement grant, and enhancements to our Community Quality of Life and Food Insecurity grants. All right. So I'll now jump into expenditures. I first started with our divisions. You'll note the page numbers if you'd like to follow along in the budget book. Our first division here is HCD administration. This division is primarily responsible for full department operations. There's limited programming here, but obviously we oversee department-wide contracts and software. This year, we're also attempting to consolidate all of our printing, office supply, and certain professional development training costs that used to be divided within the division within this division expenditure, which is why you see some changes in line items there. Okay, moving right along, our economic development division. Want to emphasize our FY25 priorities here, which include small business support, the recreation center redevelopment, our economic development service corridors, and I specifically want to highlight a focus this year and a new funding this year for our corridors that do not have some of our larger service contract providers, that's specifically our New Hampshire Avenue corridor, as well as the Flower and Long Branch corridor. If you see on each of these slides as we go through them and as you follow along later, I've tried to emphasize the continuing programming that exists within these expenditure lines, the programming that is continuing but maybe has transitioned to different budget lines, as well as the new programming that we're including for this year. So as you see, this expenditure line includes our economic development service contracts. In years past, it had also included our farmers market contracts, but we are moving those into our interdepartmental budget line, which you'll see again a little bit later. And the new programming that we're proposing here is a new fund that we're tentatively calling a pre-development fund. This would be a fund available, to promote redevelopment opportunities in some of, specifically the New Hampshire Avenue corridor and the Flower Avenue Long Branch corridor. This would be a competitive funding opportunity for property owners who have properties that they're looking to add additional density to, exploring redevelopment opportunities, but maybe lack the skills, expertise, understanding to kind of take the first steps in that. So this would be a fund that would allow those selected properties to have access to both architects and design services, as well as financial pro forma services to be able to kind of map out, see the feasibility of potential redevelopment projects in these priority corridors that Council has identified. Moving on, our Arts and Humanities Division. Our priorities here continue to remain the same. As I mentioned before, we have a very successful Tacoma Public Arts series, and we look forward to continuing that in FY25. You see, again, a minor decrease here in expenditures, but programming is expected to remain constant. Okay, continuing to move on, planning and development services. This is an interesting budget category because, quite honestly, most of our planning and development services division budget is actually accounted for in other lines such as CIP and Special Revenue Fund. A lot of these are program-based, and we're very lucky and work hard to find external funding for a lot of that planning work. So some of the priorities that you see here for this division aren't necessarily accounted for within this budget line, but are accounted for when we get to CIP and Special Revenue Fund. I'll just point out some of the FY25 priorities for the division, though. As mentioned, the Public Space Management Plan was passed last year. We are greatly looking forward to beginning to implement that, both in terms of projects as well as in terms of process. It's going to require collaboration, not just within the planning division, not just within the HC department, but across the city as we roll out the Public Space Management Toolkit and Tool Card. Additionally, the big change and big kind of focus for this year, as I mentioned earlier, is kind of transit and roadway planning. So we're proposing the addition of an FTE for a transit planner who would be responsible again for engagement efforts and supporting kind of analysis and, feasibility studies of proposed traffic calming and larger traffic studies. The other thing you'll see as we get later on in the budget here is a CIP request specifically for traffic studies. So I believe when we were here in the fall, one thing we talked about was there are certain traffic study expertise that are kind of outside the scope of what we have here, right? Traffic engineering is not something that we have staffing for. It's not something that we are proposing to hire a transit planner for either, right? So the traffic studies line that you see in the CIP, which would be administered by the Planning and Development Services Division, would be responsible for identifying consultants and conducting those traffic engineering studies. A few other priorities here just to mention. Hospital site development review, as I mentioned, we've passed the minor master plan, but the minor master plan has a lot of recommendations around a very important site for this city, which is the former Washington Adventist Hospital site. Definitely a priority in FY25 is going to be working very closely with those property owners and the community at large, finalizing a plan, working on a plan, and presenting that plan, analyzing that plan as it hopefully moves through development review. Just very briefly to continue on, sorry, I always say very briefly and then I talk a little too much, but continuing programming here, I also just want to emphasize is all of our Safe Routes to School programming exists within this budget line. However, we are moving site improvements fully over to CIP. There used to be a small site improvement allocation within this line item as well that's being consolidated in CIP. And new programming, as we mentioned, the transit planner, though funded through Red Light Camera Fund, would live within this expenditure line. And the other thing we're proposing to expand in FY25, within our service and charges line is some enhanced translation services efforts. One thing that's really critically important for the city and especially for this division is that we make sure that when we do engagement, good engagement means reaching people where they are and in the ways that they can be reached. And translation has been a key component of that, and a key component that we're constantly exploring new avenues to more effectively reach across those lines of difference when we do our engagement work. Good. Sorry about that. Okay. Our housing division, our focus for FY25 with housing is really going to be about policies and procedures. We're really excited to go into FY25 with a fully staffed housing division and a fully experienced housing division as well. We've had we've been lucky to have Devin as our housing manager here for a few years after a little bit of turnover, and I am thankful every day that we have Devin here because of the thoughtfulness that he puts into all of our policies and making Tacoma Park a great place for folks to live. So I'll just highlight a few kind of priorities that we have. One is multifamily property improvements. We've talked a little bit about our multifamily building improvements grant that we piloted last year. It was tremendously successful, and we've been able to expand programming this year with external grant funding. We mentioned updates to our rental licensing program, both the software side of things as well as our enforcement arm, as well as more targeted programming for landlord-tenant outreach and engagement. If you notice here under new programming, I just want to highlight two new programs that we're proposing for this year that relate to that. Well, one is contract funding for landlord-tenant counseling and legal assistance. One thing we often find when tenants come in to us for client intake with emergency issues, a lot of them often need legal advice, can't afford a lawyer, and we're not equipped, obviously, to provide that sort of advice on staff. So this would be hopefully a contract that would allow us to bring in some pro bono legal services to assist tenants and landlords who are going through potentially legal challenging issues as it relates to their housing. And the other new programming is we are cautiously optimistic that we will have a new rental licensing software to release prior to the next round of rental licensing renewal in the fall and winter of 2024. Okay, I'll keep moving along. Next, and I believe final division in this is our code enforcement division. While the code enforcement budget here that you see is not changing greatly, staff are planning multiple changes in our code enforcement process for FY 2025. This is an acknowledgement of issues that have been raised by council and the public. These changes primarily focus on a clearer and more targeted process for how cases move through the city system. While the city currently has a very patient code enforcement case system, before each case moves to a punitive municipal infraction or citation, it moves through several steps to encourage a homeowner to address issues. Those steps including a courtesy notice, notice of violation, and a failure to abate notice. However, moving through that process currently is based primarily on time limits and owner engagement. Staff look forward to working with council to identify both your priorities as well as staff priorities as we develop a more comprehensive evaluation process for cases that can take into account issues more than just time and resident engagement. Things such as public safety risks, things such as ability to address an issue, so on and so forth. So we look forward to coming back to you and helping to hear from you your priorities so that we can set up an evaluation system and a case process system that best address those priorities. I want to be clear, while this process will still lead to the same number of cases being opened, we're hoping that a clearer process will focus firstly on greater education and clarity on the levels of cases. As I said previously, very few cases ever proceed to citation. At any given time, we have only about 10 cases that are actually quote-unquote infractions or citations. But many of these cases that are not yet at the citation level still need to be raised to homeowners as potential violations or potential future health and safety risks. The second goal of this clearer process would be a better prioritization of case types that again better align with council priorities. Thirdly, a clearer system to evaluate and audit complaints of the process or officers. And finally, eventually, one thing that we unfortunately were not able to work into the budget for this year, but that has been a priority for us and something we'll get to in the challenges section here, funding assistance to support homeowners, especially low-income, senior, aging-in-place homeowners who have property maintenance concerns. So the carrot along with the stick. Okay, so moving out of our division expenditure lines, I also wanted to highlight our interdepartmental line because you'll see a very massive increase here from $0 in FY24 to $200,000 here in FY25. This is due firstly to the transition of funds out of ARPA. So a lot of funds used to exist within these two lines that were ARPA funded over the past few years. They now need to be accounted for again in the general fund. And secondly, we've also internally reassigned several programs out of departmental expenditures and into these lines. So the transition programs you see here, our emergency rental assistance program, our community quality of life grants, and our open for business grants are all moving out of ARPA and into these lines. And our farmers market contracts, excuse me, are moving out of, as I mentioned earlier, the economic development division and into these lines as well. Lastly, I just want to highlight a very small request that we've put for this year for a new program, which is a rental insurance pilot program. One of the lessons we learned from the new tenant displacement ordinance that we passed last year was that while it was wonderful to put in that ordinance that tenants could avail themselves of rental insurance in displacement situations and landlords could ask them to do so, we also have a lot of tenants who might not be able to afford rental insurance, So a pilot program to allow those renters to afford a rental insurance when they rent here would go a long way towards making that tenant displacement law effective and supportive for our resident base. All right, almost done, a few more slides. So our capital improvement program, you'll see a lot of capital improvement program items here in the budget. I just want to highlight that these fall into basically three big buckets you can think of. One is the externally funded capital projects, which often come with a required 20% city match. So what you'll see in the CIP budget are lines that say special revenue fund traditionally, so SRF. Those have no general fund impact. Those are externally funded grants. But you'll also see a general fund line as well, which is the 20% match that is required of the city for those funds. And I've outlined the ones that you can see here below. The second type of CIP request that the department traditionally has is our other annually reoccurring special revenue funds that have capital improvement uses. So again, these have no general fund impact. They are special revenue funds, but they're outlined within the CIP budget as well because they go towards capital improvement programming. And then the last category that you see, is our actual general fund capital projects. So these are general fund projects. They are general fund dollars, but they're in the capital improvement program budget. And the two that you see here with FY25 impacts, are the public space management plan implementation. This is a number here. We will use the public space management toolkit to identify priority projects for the upcoming year. However, as identified in council priorities, this may be something like the Ann Street public space investments. This was something that we definitely highlighted as an opportunity, but again, we have the toolkit. We want to make sure that we're not just making our own assumptions, but applying the toolkit properly. We also recognize that this is a small amount and an annual small amount, but we're hoping that it will be supplemented by external special revenue funds as we identify projects. And then lastly, you see a new regular request, which is traffic studies. This is a new request where annual funding can be allocated based on the work of the new transit planner and traffic calming requests, though it is certainly likely that the FY25 allocation would be used for the expanded Ward 6 traffic study that council and staff first, well, not first, but last discussed in the fall of 2023. All right, now the slide I'm most proud of, which is our department's special revenue fund allocation. One of the things that the department works exceptionally hard on is bringing in external funding into the city. You see a chart here on the right that I quickly tabulated all of our projected expenditures that impact HCD in the FY25 budget. And you'll see that the special revenue fund dollars, so those that have no general fund impact, our external grant funds that we have brought in, account for 42%, or a little over $2 million of our entire projected expenditure impact in the FY25 budget as a department. So we work very hard. I've highlighted the programs that you can see here that currently are in our special revenue fund allocation. And I'm happy to speak to any of them, but I'll also point out that this list kind of continues to change throughout the year, and often when we come with budget amendments throughout the year, it's because we've gotten new grants that we need to work into the budget throughout the year. They're also often multi-year grants, so the amount can change through fiscal years based on how successful we were in spending down in the first fiscal year. So often the numbers you see, in the budget are kind of either best guessed estimates or they're kind of the remaining totality of funds from the special revenue fund line, but they do kind of often change throughout the year. And I promised I would highlight and pick up on our grant coordinator even more. I just wanted to point out here real briefly, which is not accounted for in this slide, but our grant coordinator began about 6 months ago, Patty Mallon. And in that time, she's been instrumental in us applying for 3 new grants that are not yet accounted for in this FY25 budget, and I feel pretty confident in saying of those 3, at least 2 of them we certainly would not have had the capacity to apply for without Patty's efforts. And just as importantly, she has also accounted for us closing 3 grants within the FY24 budget cycle. So these are 3 grants that we have closed out. We no longer have obligations on the books, and we've completed the projects. And again, Patty has been instrumental in helping with that. So we thank council greatly for providing that funding last year, and we hope we have repaid it. Great, so running through here, your FY25 council priority items and how we've looked to address them within our department budget. First was take steps to advance the development of Tacoma Park Recreation Center. We have existing FY24 money that we will likely roll over in FY25. I think we had a great work session conversation a few months ago about kind of the scope and challenges of that full budget. We certainly look forward to coming back to you and exploring those options further and exploring those funding options further as the year progresses. Next council priority was around the public space management plan and the evaluation tool, and highlighted a few potential projects. I'll point out that we have the public space management plan implementation CIP dollars, as well as our community development block grant funds, which are devoted to, public space improvements and which we can target in future years, including FY25 to public space management plan implementation. Next, a big priority, improving traffic calming in the city. Again, touched on this a lot, but the new traffic planner is a key portion of us being able to implement this priority, as well as the traffic studies ongoing CIP request. Additionally, we have many existing and planned right-of-way planning grants and matches. Most of the special revenue fund and CIP allocations that you saw were devoted to roadway planning grants. And I'd also be remiss if I didn't highlight our Safe Routes to School programming, which is instrumental in programming, coordinating, and capital resources for traffic calming in the city. All right, and lastly was the priority around updated housing policies, including both multifamily rehabilitation incentive programs, as well as addressing matters related to code enforcement and multi-family on-site property management. I've tried throughout the presentation to kind of highlight some of the new programs that we're proposing as it relates to these, but I'll also point out, which I believe I really only briefly touched on, but our multifamily building improvement fund, which we already have an active grant round for, have already gotten some great applications, and we're really grateful for the larger allocation in FY 24-25, as well as the amount of grant funds we've been able to receive, because we're able to do much larger allotments that are able to have much larger impact with those funds in this year. All right, so emerging issues and challenges. The really critical kind of challenge for us as a department is the loss and impending loss of ARPA funding. So we've been really, really lucky over the past years to use ARPA not just to supplement programs that were traditionally general fund funded, but also to expand some of our direct service programming, some of our quality of life programming, which I think folks often have kind of the highest expectation and have the biggest reward for. So we definitely have a big question, not just here in FY25, but in future years for the department, how we're going to address that funding gap. Just to kind of give you a sense of scale, our FY24 ARPA funded HCD specific programming was a little over $1.8 million. We're dropping currently to only $70,000 in FY24. So that's, $1.8 million that if we want to continue programming at the level we've done, we need to account for somewhere in our general fund budget or find additional special revenue funds for. So with that in mind, we have made several kind of funding level reductions to programs in FY25, and I wanted to be clear about that here in this presentation. Those are emergency rental assistance, which we're dropping to, I believe, $100,000. Community quality life grants, which we're dropping from $110,000 to $50,000. Food insecurity grants, which are dropping from $90,000 to $70,000. Open for business grants, which we're only funding at $50,000. And then division-specific contracts for services. I call this one out just because I think we as a department, I won't speak for other departments, but we as a department especially have emerging projects that emerge throughout the year. And we've been very lucky over past years to have a little bit of flexibility to address things that have come up, and we have a lot less of that flexibility this year. It's a much tighter budget for us. But it allows us to do a lot of the new programming that we've highlighted and allowed us to do a little more planning here at the start of the year for those programs. And then I'll also point out that there were several wish list items that didn't make the cut here for us as a department and as staff. We worked really hard this year to do our budgeting as a staff a little bit differently within the department. We approached it from a kind of zero budgeting perspective. So we laid out the programs, policies, priorities that both council and staff wanted to accomplish over the year, ranked all of those and fit in what we could and acknowledged the things that we couldn't. So the things that kind of didn't make the cut that I just wanted to call out here were our tenant association grants and technical assistance. This would have been a new program that would have provided either direct funding or additional technical assistance for tenant associations. Also, as I talked about during the code enforcement section, a homeowner or aging in place maintenance assistance fund. Additionally, an open data platform. One thing that's been a high priority for us and that we've kind of learned throughout the past year is that as staff running programs, we collect a lot of great data, and a lot of that data is not easily accessible for residents, for council, for other folks. An open data platform is something that a lot of other municipalities are transitioning to, providing that data publicly available in a way that folks can download, can play around with it for themselves. That would require a pretty substantial kind of upfront investment, though, that we're not proposing here in FY25. And then lastly, a few other wish list items. We had initially planned for a few additional public art installations that we're not planning for now in FY25, and have additionally cut our bus shelter improvement funding that we've had in years past. All right, and then 2 more slides. Just wanted to highlight some of the division-specific kind of emerging issues that are both budget-related and a bit broader when we talk about our priorities for the next year. Under housing, these are rental licensing and troubled property enforcement. So as I talked, a big priority for us this year is kind of not just identifying problem properties, but really targeting what our enforcement efforts with them look like. That probably will require adjustments to administrative regulations, adjustments to council policies, and other things that will need to be coming to you throughout the year for. We also have already introduced kind of new housing incentive structures, and it was a council budget priority as well. We talked a little bit about the multifamily tax credit proposal that staff introduced earlier this spring, and we look forward to returning with a fuller proposal with action from council. And the other challenge for us is our Housing Reserve Fund. We are proposing to provide some funding for the Housing Reserve Fund this year, but as we look to target our spending with that fund, knowing that there's more money coming into the fund is kind of critical for us when we do long-term planning and identify projects from the fund. Economic development, as we've talked about several times here, there are still ongoing purple line impacts, not just from construction, but from also the future impacts of having an open purple line that we're getting closer to looking forward to every fiscal year. And as we also have alluded to here, the recreation center funding. Code enforcement, I talked extensively about this, but I'll just touch again on those challenges and priorities for this year. Clear case evaluation, structures and priorities, an auditing of resident complaints, and finding future funding streams for supporting low-income and senior residents. Planning, I'll point out that a lot of our roadway and right-of-way plans, it's a good problem, but also a problem to have, are approaching 100% design docs, which is great, but which also means if we want to get them built, we've got to find, $10 to $20 million a project to get them built, right? So we're kind of going to be at an impasse after this fiscal year, kind of how do we advance those projects past the design phase and into construction. The Public Space Management Toolkit we're very excited to have, but implementing it properly is going to be very important and probably going to require kind of some process and policy changes for council and for staff, both within HCD and citywide. Talked a lot about kind of the enhanced engagement strategies approach that we as a division have and that the planning department is responsible for. And we also touched a little bit on the next steps for the hospital site. All right, so just to summarize, last slide here. So our key takeaways from the budget. Fingers crossed we'll be fully staffed for the next fiscal year. We're very proud to bring in large amounts of external funding. We'll be bringing in a new transit planner and additional funds for traffic studies. And we'll also have a lot of new tools over the next year to improve our processes both and make them more equitable and transparent. And again, I'll just close with kind of this big ARPA funding question that I think we, as a department especially, are going to be struggling with over the next few years. All right, thank you very much.
Excellent, thank you so much, Director Cowler. Councilmember Small.
Thank you, Mayor. I promise to try to make this as quick as I possibly can. And I'll comport, I believe, a small part of my comments. When you look at your presentation, you have a ton of responsibilities that are going down vertically from you or from your department. And it is in that regard, with like candidly and sincerely due deference, like it's not necessarily surprising where the gaps in things are, because you got a lot of stuff. That being said, this again seems like a place where some degree of reorganization that would align people in priority manners, or having these two gentlemen institutionalized in a different way or something, has got to help you, because there's no way that you are not overworked. Like even if you had like 100 people working for you, like you have like essentially a corporate job, and like you're not getting CEO compensation. That's the first thing. Second thing is, among those departments, I would express some degree of continuing concern over the manner and implementation of code enforcement. I will speak unironically about that. It is really kind of odd when you inadvertently, like, yeah, some new handlebars for my bike. My bike is ill, so I wanted to ride it. And, I came around the corner, so I saw the code enforcement dude, and then I saw, when I was putting the bike away, like, street's a hard street to do U-turns on. Like, there's a big circle there. But, when you come out, you bust a person, it's kind of awkward. Now, that being said, I will not probe that issue any further in this particular room. But I also saw this weekend someone urinate in the parking lot of a place where we lost a restaurant of generational import because we have a brand new liquor store there. And after they did it, they went back to the liquor store. And then, as out of curiosity, I counted 5 different people staggering across the street. And, when I look at that and I think about, like, going to the meetings of the community association and having people talk about what appears to be larger amounts of vagrancy or public drunkenness, or even the proliferate nature of all of these liquor store options at the same time as they're degrading the community with Purple Line. And I'm not a dumb guy, and I know that you are at heart a rouser of rabble. And I expect that you're not a stupid person either. I will conclude on this issue by saying that there seems to be, again, another nexus whereby some accountability for scofflaw businesses and other sorts of things have some sort of regulatory impact from some sort of code enforcement where it's absolutely necessary, rather than putting people in situations that continue to appear like they're at worst vindictive and at best ironically suited for significant numbers of accusations. Thank you. And we'll wrap later. I think you guys should candidly, if you knew how janky my body was today, you'd be applauding me. But I'm gonna go. But I did want to stay and make sure that I said that to you because, like, at the end of the day, you got too much to do because some of it is not necessarily being accomplished at a level at which it should be. And I know that that is due to wranglings and movings around and things like that that you never expected to have to deal with. But in so many ways, the rent has to come due because there's really dangerous and scary things that are potentially on the horizon if nobody does anything about it. Traffic and otherwise. Thank you.
Councilmember Fulcher?
I was giving you a dirty look when you said that the transit, what are we calling them? You know, if we decide to go through with it, I'm like,
Transit
wait,
planner.
Stop saying if. Yeah, so on page 16, you have a list of these capital improvement program spending items. And I'm just wondering, and I do really appreciate that it takes a lot of planning to do anything. How many of these are actually doing things versus just planning? So when you look at this list, where do you see projects where we're actually starting to do something with them?
Sure. So what I'll point out real briefly, and I know this is absolutely impossible to read, but maybe if we look to the left-hand side of the slide. So the projects referenced here, the Maple Avenue Connectivity, Met Branch Trail, and New Ave's Bikeways sections, all of those, I believe Met Branch Trail will go into FY26, but the other two will be completed design efforts by the end of FY25. So they will be completed. There will be permit documents in hand that, again, funding permitting, could be built, could have something happen with them.
It's engineering.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Gibson?
Gosh, there is, as Jason said, there's a lot. And I do wonder whether the question of, core, doing the core things, there's a number of new suggestions and new programs potentially recommended, and I wonder if we can do them all. But I just want to focus on, I'll have to come back with some questions to you afterwards, but just a couple highlights. I'm really glad that we're taking on code enforcement and doing it better, because it's been one of the highest amount of complaints that I've gotten and shared with you, and I believe that we can do better. So I want to thank you for that and look forward to being engaged. In terms of, I guess, the public space management plan and the 20K plan for implementation, I guess my question is,
Excuse me.
prior to an implementation, apart from scoring something, there's the planning process. So where does that come in, and are there plans to do plans on other than the one site that you're talking about implementing? In other words, feasibility study or some sort of pre-planning for other potential public space management plan suggestions.
Sure. So as you mentioned, we have a lot of things we do and we'd like to do, and certainly we have a long list of things that we'd like to do. Mm-hmm. Certainly I think there are some that have bubbled to the surface because they have been parts of discussions here in council, parts of discussions we've had with elected officials, and our goal would be to kind of, again, take those, use the tool, make sure that we are identifying and prioritizing right, and be able to use the tool as we've talked about, a narrative to kind of speak to why we are, targeting certain projects first or targeting certain projects second. So I think to answer shortly, yes, we have a list. Is it a comprehensive list? Probably not, because there's a million different things we can do, but it's certainly a list of the things that we've heard both from council and again from residents as we've engaged them throughout the public space management process.
I'm sorry, it's still, so you have a list of projects and you anticipate or you have scored them. Is that first answer?
So we've scored certain projects through both preparing for this dollar amount ask as well as through preparing for external funding as well.
And then, but is there, again, is there a step between scoring and then the actual, then planning and then implementation? I mean, your pre-design, you're talking about your 30% thing.
Sure.
So is there a 30% for the public space management plan projects? And if so, I may want to suggest some.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I'll say with the $20,000 that we're asking for here, we would not be getting to a completed, built-out version of any of the public space management ideas that have been generated, right? So I would anticipate that any project that moved forward with this funding would be kind of that, to your point, that 30% kind of
So it's not
project.
implementation, it's design at best.
With this dollar amount, that would be my projection, yeah.
Okay, and so other design suggestions would have to come with a similar price tag?
Yeah, as you see kind of in outer years, I think we've projected, it looks like 30,000 in the next 2 years in CIP, right? So yes, similar funding levels.
Yes, suppose I suggested that we wanted to do a second one this year, FY25. I'm just kind of talking out loud about doing more than the one Ann Street project, if that's what we ended up doing. Okay. And then lastly, there's a number of pieces that come together, and I'm not that familiar with the various programs, but on the question is, I guess, what kinds of integrated or coordinated efforts are going to be worked on in FY25 to address the renovation, the protection of the buildings on Maple Avenue?
Sure. So
as a follow-up from the minor master plan, as a part of our overall trying to protect folks and buildings and infrastructure? So,
Sure. So I outlined a few of our kind of housing priorities for this year, and I think all of them tie into that follow-up from that Maple Avenue conversation. So I'd say a lot of that, the kind of budget-specific opportunities that we're talking about are things like the rental insurance pilot program, are things like our multifamily building improvement fund, which again, the expansion of that program will let us do larger buildings, like the buildings that we see along Maple Avenue. But also a lot of that work, I think, is going to be the policies and procedures work that isn't necessarily, I mean, is reflected in the personnel costs, certainly in the budget, but isn't necessarily reflected in the services and charges that you see in the budget.
okay, I guess would you send me or kind of the constellation of programs, initiatives, et cetera, that would be focused on particularly the multifamily houses on Maple Avenue?
Sure, specifically on kind of the existing.
Yeah,
Preservation of
we've got a
housing.
concern about their renovation. We don't want to see them bought out and torn down. We want to see them renovated. So, thank you.
Absolutely.
All right, just to clarify any information requested, we of course will share with all of the mayor and council.
Councilmember Fulcher.
Just for my better understanding, a lot of these projects that we see in this SIP would have gone through our new public space management plan rubric had we had it at the time, right? And so you're only going to be putting so many new plans onto, your plate when you still have so much on your plate at one time.
Yeah, I don't want to fully speak for Roz and the planning division in terms of like exactly how the toolkit is going to be implemented in every single situation, but certainly these are public right-of-way projects, right, that the public space management plan discusses. One thing I just wanted to highlight real briefly, since you got me on it, you see a small item here that's a new item called roadway and bikeway connectivity matches. We acknowledge and often don't do a lot of long-range planning for the fact that most of these roadway external funds specifically require 20% city matches, right? They do require some sort of city input. So we've put this placeholder in the budget here in outer years to kind of account for at least some level of that anticipated match, right? So to your point, we might not know what those projects look like quite yet in those outer years, but we are acknowledging up front that there is going to be some kind of city cost in future years if we want to continue to bring in those external funds.
Okay, and so like this 100,000 that I see in fiscal year 26 is sort of
Correct.
like, similar to what I see this year. It's just all in one spot.
Right, and I think the hope is that we got into those later years that would actually be broken out by the projects, right?
Right.
Once we know what those are, but for the moment, we wanted to make sure that we acknowledge that cost even in the outer year budgets.
Thank you, that's helpful. It's interesting to understand.
Councilmember Honzak.
Just a quick question, Director Keller. On page 19 of the presentation, I was just wondering, and you don't have to reiterate right here, right now, could we get in writing those numbers that you cited off the reductions, the funding level reductions in those 5 line items?
Yeah, absolutely. I apologize. I meant
No,
to put
that's
them
okay.
here and did
I
not. So,
found
yeah.
myself scrabbling for my pen and I didn't get it right away, so thank you.
Yeah, and to be clear, what I will provide, if it makes sense, is our kind of hoped for funding ask,
Sure.
and then the kind of ultimate ask that we submitted.
Yeah,
So
that
some
would
of
be
it
really
might not
helpful for
necessarily align
reconciliation.
exactly with what the FY24 amount was, but it's kind of what our planned
Thanks.
hope was.
Great. Thank you so much for sticking it out. You saved the best for last, right?
The longest for last, most certainly.
You are always last, unfortunately. So I do want to follow up on one question that Councilmember Gibson asked about the possibility of 2 public space management projects in a single fiscal year. And I do like to be mindful of the fact that on one hand, we say, you're doing way too much. And then on the other hand, we're not going to pay for you to get more people. And then on the other hand, we want you to do more work. So is there the capacity to take on more than one, with your current staffing levels, more than one public space management plan project design in this fiscal year?
Yeah, I actually think for me that question is would be more relevant to our ability, quite honestly, to bring in special revenue funds for the projects, right? I think it's less certainly on a staff capacity side and on a how far this $20,000 can go side, it would be a challenge. But if we were able to identify projects that are, attractive to funders, that align with funding priorities, certainly these are the types of projects that could bring in external funding, which would enable us to hire consultants, hire folks who could assist with that. But yes, at current funding levels, it would be a challenge for us to do kind of a lot of implementation on an annual basis, right? It would be a slower rollout.
Yeah. So the idea would be that you all will still be doing, in essence, your job in terms of identifying projects for the queue, identifying third-party funding sources that can actually kind of help to bring the items.
Yeah,
to
and
life,
I think it's a really good point that the public space management plan itself doesn't necessarily identify new priorities or new projects. What it does is it provides a framework for us to take those existing projects, take new projects that come in, and be able to evaluate them in a holistic and equitable way.
Yeah. And so one of the things that I do want to kind of talk a little bit about are the CDBG funds. And I know in the past, we've had some challenges just of our own doing to make those dollars a little bit more flex in terms of what we could potentially use those dollars for. And I see that we're talking about the 91K, like forward looking, and it reads a little bit more flex maybe than what we had, what we traditionally use those dollars for, which I'm happy to see. But I guess my question for you all is, does that mean that the council will need to get on it in terms of modifying, if for colleagues that are not familiar, the community development block grant funds are federal dollars that different communities, municipal counties can use for all sorts of things. It could be used to help do things like build a rec center, or it could be used for things like, facade improvements of businesses along the stretch. But the city of Tacoma Park's prior council made a resolution that CDBG funds can only be used for, was it like traffic? Well, no, it's not traffic. It's like infrastructure.
City right-of-way infrastructure.
City right-of-way.
Improvements, correct.
Yeah. So it's even wonkier than so that might mean, for the purpose of that last bullet that we were talking about, making sure that the council is creating those policies. And so I think, kind of going back to the point that was raised before about minor master plan versus what's in the budget and feasible for you all to do, and what the homework we have to do as a council, a lot of it relates to the policies. A lot of it relates to us kind of rolling up our sleeves and putting pen to paper to try to address things that may either be in our code or prior resolutions, or create new resolutions, or even things like, I was reminiscing on the presentation you gave about the housing credit program. And so all of that whole body of initiatives really do help to kind of tell that story of all of the different policy work we need to do in order to ensure that some of the negative externalities associated with the minor master planner that was called out aren't realized. So I did just want to highlight that because I noticed it was a little flexy in terms of the table, in terms of how you describe using those funds, and which I think is a really, really, really good thing.
Could I just extrapolate on that very briefly, which is, correct. So the city gets a $91,000 allocation annually of CDBG funds. Those funds are restricted both by the federal government, but also, as you mentioned, by council at the moment. What I will say is we've intentionally or not kind of built up a pot of money because the types of projects that we've identified are not $91,000 projects. They're quite more expensive. So we've built up a pot. We are spending that pot down. The current project that we were cautiously optimistic would kind of only spend down our existing funds and let us kind of be a little more flexible in 25 is the Houston Court biofiltration project. We just closed an RFP on that. The cost, I think, is going to be a little bit higher than we had anticipated, so we probably will use some of these FY25 funds to finish that project as well. But then, yes, we certainly will also be coming to you with some. I think the problem we now have is we've got too many ideas on how we want to spend it. We probably need to pare that down a little bit before we come back to council.
Great. And I just want to say I'm so excited about the traffic staff and the traffic studies. I know that a lot of folks want us to just go in and close streets and do all these kinds of things, but traffic is like water, flows to the path of least resistance, and so fixing something on your street can create havoc on someone else's, and it does require pretty sophisticated engineers and actual studies to be done in order to come up with some longer term solutions. So I'm glad that we have this in the budget. One of the things that would be helpful, not for the budget, but down the line, how we would talk about prioritizing which communities, like is it going to be data-driven or evidence-based, based on any analysis that the traffic person has their hands on, and then they're able to say, hey, these are some of the places that are, again, all traffic issues are real because people feel it, but then there are some areas where volume and complex safety issues are more pressing than others. So it would be helpful to come back to council as we can kind of talk through kind of like how those particular future locations will be identified.
Yeah. And I think we're actually having that staff member on staff that will be kind of one of the first questions that they wrestle with, right?
Oh,
so,
awesome.
I think that's an important question, though. Yes.
Awesome. And just trying to think through budget stuff. In terms of, you had mentioned the contractor support, and I do realize, particularly for you all, because you don't have enough bodies, and candidly, even if you were to have a bunch of bodies, the technical expertise needed to kind of do some of the things that, and like, even the convenings require a special set of skills, to facilitate these kinds of focus groups and things. So in terms of some of the contractor support, do you all feel like what you have proposed in the budget is sufficient to kind of get through the activities that are planned for 25? Or are you thinking you're still gonna need?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think the thing maybe to be aware of, and the way that we've kind of shaped this budget ask, is that we have tried to be a lot more predictive in terms of kind of the things that we think we're going to see throughout the year and account for those within specific programs, right? And that's why you see a fair amount of new programs here is, I think, two reasons. One, we have staff that has been settled here for a few years and kind of has their priorities and understanding of how to best implement the plan, and that involves new programming. But it also is about, us trying to be proactive in terms of identifying the priorities and projects that we see throughout the year. I think what it means as far as potential council impact to be aware of is, we often get asked really, really great questions and really great things that merit a lot of future study. And some of that can be done in-house, and others of that, like the traffic studies are a great example, require, outside expertise and outside stuff that a city of 17,000 people doesn't have the staff to do internally, right? So we will kind of, I think, if I had to look ahead, probably be a little more limited in terms of kind of some of those questions and how we prioritize kind of some of those bigger, meatier topics that emerge throughout the year.
All right, Councilmember Gibson.
Just one follow-up with regard to the funding for the traffic person. It's from the red light camera, and I guess, is that a stable source of funds? What if you get more than the person makes? What if you get less? How do you handle an uncertain funding source, an untried funding source?
Sure. I don't know if maybe one of my city manager's office reps want to take a stab at that.
Yeah, no, it's a fair question. And, of course, we have a number of things that, presently in ARPA, we're trying to migrate back to the general fund. Here, in this particular budget where we're trying to balance it without being, finding the need to adjust the property tax rate, is we're looking at a new revenue source that we feel fairly confident. Chief Duvall in particular, in his analysis, a minimum of $1 million a year, that we think this will more than cover that position, as well as some other things that would be charged to the red light camera fund. The red light camera fund, as mentioned earlier, doesn't have any restrictions. It can be used for really any purpose. I've recommended to the mayor and council that the purpose, that rather than just put the revenue from the red light camera fund directly into the general fund, that there be established a reserve within the police department for public safety types of work, whether they positions or projects. So things like the speed camera, as the balance dwindles and the revenue source declines in speed camera, some of those expenses would migrate to red light. This position would likewise be within red light. And we have some CIP projects that could be in the general fund or they could be here, but they do qualify because it would be pedestrian safety, traffic calming, and that sort of CIP project. So I think that I'm feeling comfortable that at least for the foreseeable future, the coming years, that this is a sustainable place to source the expenditure of the new transit planner position. If over time that proves to be unsustainable and we start to see a decline, perhaps because of more compliance, such as was the case with the speed camera fund, we just have to make some decisions. I think there will always be a certain amount of revenue that will be generated. Unlike, like the speed camera program, the red light installations can be transitioned to different locations. So there are strategies to keep, the number one reason, of course, for that isn't to generate revenue. The number one reason for the programs, both speed camera and red light camera, as the mayor and council do know, is to modify unsafe driving practices. And a lot of cities have found that as they've gotten compliance in certain areas, they migrate their installations to other parts of town, and the revenue goes back up. That's just an outcome of the number one priority, which is to increase public safety. I do think that over time, you'll, for a number of years, that this is a reasonable place to put this position. I think the work that the transit planner will do, he or she will be contributing very directly to projects that enhance public safety, both pedestrian and vehicular.
So, thanks. We anticipate that the red light camera will generate more funds than what the transit planner will need for his or her, and that the excess funds will go into this public, this police fund.
All of it will go into a reserve fund, and it would be drawn from there.
All of it goes into
all
a
it goes
reserve,
into a
and then
reserve.
Out of the reserve comes the transit. Okay.
As well as other purposes as determined by the mayor and council.
Okay.
But my recommendation would be that they have a public safety component to them.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, seeing no more lights. Thank you so much, Director Cowler, and everyone that stuck around the whole time. This has been a very helpful meeting. Just as a reminder, we're going to be meeting on Wednesday to start reconciliation. So get those juices flowing in terms of what you would like to see in the budget. All right, thank you all so much. Have a great night.